Hello and welcome everyone who's here in the course in person, and everyone who's online joining us either on Zoom or YouTube or Facebook. I'm very, I know David doesn't like to use the word excited, but I cannot maybe hide my excitement to have David here, and great pleasure to have David come here and do this course for us. I've been learning with him for about a year now, and it's been a profound experience, a life-changing experience that I've experienced learning the teachings of the Buddha through him. And I'm glad to share it with all of you here. Um, I know some of you have been learning from much longer than I have, and I'm sure you have similar experiences. This is the first class that we are having. This is the introduction to the teachings of Buddha, and then the foundations of enlightenment will happen starting tomorrow at 9:30. Just a few housekeeping notes. We have snacks and water and other stuff on the table here. There's a donation box also there as well if you like to donate. We have two bathrooms. One go left here and all the way to the back, and then when you can go around and downstairs, there's another bathroom here if you like to use. Um, that's it. And I would just go back to David to start off. And thank you, David, for being here and helping us all.
Okay, thank you, Vipav. Welcome to all of you guys. Welcome to everyone here. Welcome to anyone who's joining us online as well. What I'm going to be doing is over the next 5 days, I'm going to be helping you guys build a foundation in the path to enlightenment based on the teachings of the Buddha. Everything that I teach is based on the original words of the Buddha. Oftentimes, when you're learning the teachings of the Buddha, particularly here in the West, they're not based on the original words of the Buddha. This is kind of challenging for the mind to think about because, especially if you're here, like in a Christian environment, kind of everybody learns from the Bible. But the teachings of the Buddha are in 45 volumes of books that are about this thick. So the average person doesn't actually have access to the original words of the Buddha because it's very expensive to print out. Where I live in Thailand, it would cost you about 3 months of your salary in order to print out all the teachings of the Buddha in these 45 volumes of books. So what I've been doing is consolidating the teachings of the Buddha, and I've put it into 13 books, and it's a kind of a consolidated version of his teachings. And then I make it available to people for free so that they don't have to purchase anything and they can just easily get access to his teachings. So I have a 13 book volume of teachings that are the original words of the Buddha. You'll see that I have classes and courses and retreats that students can take. And every time that I teach, it's always available to everybody at no cost. That's very important so that there's no barriers in the way of anybody and anybody who's interested in learning the teachings. So I teach in Chiang Mai. I teach people invite me around. So I know that you thank me for coming, but I'd like to thank you and your wife and your family, Shweta, your daughter Anushka, and Ottoman for hosting me here. It's been nothing but great hospitality. So I always enjoyed Indian food, but now I really enjoy Indian food. I've had all kinds of home cooked meals here and going out to eat food and things like this. So thank you for your support to bring me here and now be able to share with you guys what the Buddha actually taught. The Buddha taught this mental state. It's called enlightenment. What enlightenment is where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. An enlightened mind no longer experiences any discontent feeling. By the time you get to enlightenment, all your anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these feelings and others are completely eliminated from the mind. And this occurs through training of the mind. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll have focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. Your personal and professional relationships will be really blossoming because you're not going to be bitter and harsh and hostile any longer in any of your relationships. You'll notice that you're not even in a bad mood any longer. It's physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience a bad mood. And the way that the Buddha did this is he figured out through his own devices, his own wisdom essentially, how to uproot the causes and conditions that are producing all of the discontent feelings, all the anger and sadness and frustration. Oftentimes, we think with our lack of wisdom in the unenlightened state that the feelings of anger and sadness and frustration and all these things are being caused by other people. But what you're going to learn if you spend time here over the next several days in a way that you can independently verify is that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And the reason why you can actually eliminate them is because your mind is actually causing them. If it was other people that was causing you to be angry and frustrated and sad and all these other feelings, you would never be able to eliminate them because it's other people that's causing it. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you've uprooted the causes and conditions that are producing these discontent feelings. And I'm going to gradually introduce you over several days of helping you to understand what is going on in the unenlightened mind and then how to actually fix it, providing you the tools and the techniques to be able to do that. But before we get into any of that, I think one of the best ways for us to start our course is just to do some meditation together. So I'm going to invite you guys to join for meditation. If you'd like to join for a meditation session, I'll do some meditation with you guys, guide you in meditation, and then we'll start our discussion on an introduction to the teachings of the Buddha. The way that I do meditation is I start with some chanting to ease us into the meditation. If you would like to do the chanting, there's some chanting sheets right here. You're welcome to get one if you like, and you can hand them around if you like. You'll see the Pali words. This is the historical language of the teachings of the Buddha. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory. Every 2 weeks, his students would come together and they would recite his teachings word for word for word. Because the ability to write things down didn't exist in that region of the world 2,500 years ago. It was not until after he died that they were actually able to write things down. So they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory. So when you're chanting, it's important to understand that there's nothing mystical or magical. This isn't a rite or ritual or a ceremony or worship. It's not prayer or anything like that. There was none of that stuff in the teachings of the Buddha. So if you see rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship or prayer associated with the teachings of the Buddha, you can be sure that that's not the teachings of the Buddha because he never used any of those things. Those were all things that people created after his death. He taught you to train your mind and cultivate the mind, and that's what's going to produce the enlightened mental state. So while during the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory, today I use chanting as a way to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. Nowadays, we have books and audiobooks, videos, podcasts, things like this that we don't need to chant in order to commit the teachings to memory, but I still chant in order to help you get more benefit out of the meditation. If you read the English translations, you're going to see a lot of respect and gratitude and appreciation for the Buddha. Because if you learn from a teacher how to move from the anger and the sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings to the peace and the joy that is the enlightened mental state, and this teacher didn't want anything from you, didn't expect anything from you, you'd probably have a lot of respect and gratitude for that person too. So I suspect that these chants were actually created by his students, either during his life or after his death. Because a Buddha wouldn't walk around saying, here, chant these things to me out of respect for me. This would be ego and arrogance and boastfulness. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you've eliminated putting yourself above people or putting yourself below people, thinking of yourself in high esteem above everybody else. This is what the mind does in the unenlightened state when it has ego, when it has conceit and arrogance. It's going to want to put itself above others and look down on people. But by the time you've trained your mind to get to enlightenment, you're no longer doing those kinds of things within your own mind or even externally. So the Buddha wouldn't have created these chants in order to have his students chant to him. But again, if you learn from someone who didn't want anything from you or expect anything from you, just out of the kindness of their heart, they help you to move from the anger and the sadness and all these other discontent feelings to the peace and joy that is enlightenment, you'd probably have a lot of respect and gratitude for that person too. So I'm going to be chanting as a way to ease us into the meditation, and you guys are welcome to join along. I'm going to be teaching you how to chant tomorrow afternoon when we get to that portion of our course, but give you guys just an experience of kind of participating along if you'd like. You can kind of chant along, and then by the time we get to the point where I'm teaching it to you, you'll have a little bit of experience, kind of gotten your feet wet a little bit. After the chanting, you're going to hear me come in with some guidance, where I'm actually going to be guiding you and almost instructing you during the meditation. But then after that, there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're just all meditating together. I'm sure you'll probably hear occasional things. You know, you might hear the wind blowing or some birds chirping or who knows what else you might hear because you can't be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. If your mind craves for it to be permanently quiet, when you hear a sound, you'll be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. But that's your own mind that's causing that. So you can't be in an environment where it's going to be permanently quiet. So when you hear a sound, just understand that it's not permanent and you don't have to crave this permanent silence so that you can just focus on the breath. And you're going to hear me guide you that when your mind moves off the breath, you can just bring it back to the breath. So there's going to be a period of time where we're just meditating together. Everyone here and anyone who's joining us online will just all be meditating at the same time. Then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. In terms of your body positioning for meditation, there's four positions that the Buddha taught. And you're going to learn all four of these as part of our time together this week. Is he taught the seated, lying, standing, and walking positions. Oftentimes people are learning in the seated position. So I'm going to give you some guidance on this, but just understand that whatever I share with you about the seated position, it's not fixed, that everybody has a different type of body and you will sit however you're comfortable. So what I share with you as guidance is just suggestions or just recommendations to help you find something that's even more comfortable. You can sit on the floor, you can sit on the sofa, on a chair. Maybe if someone's at home, they might be in a wheelchair, on a bench, or something like this. You can really sit however you're comfortable. There's not just one fixed way to sit. But if you're on the floor, you might have some cushions under your ear. This is kind of common to kind of soften your seat. And then people will oftentimes cross their legs. But again, it's really up to you. You can sit however you like. If you do cross your legs, you'd kind of like them to be lightly crossed because that'll allow the circulation to flow in the lower body. Whereas if they were real tight, it would impede the circulation and cause pain in the lower body. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This kind of gets your hips up in the air and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. And if this is comfortable for you, you could use it, but it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. You need to find what's comfortable for you. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you find whatever's comfortable for you. And then anybody who's on the sofa or a bench or a wheelchair or in a chair, you can sit however you're comfortable as well. Some options might be to put your feet flat on the floor. Some people like to put their legs or their feet lightly crossed at the ankles. And then the hands and the arms, again, you can put those wherever you like. It's helpful if the upper body is erect. If you have the sternum up and the shoulders back, this will help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. And if you were real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be erect. So this keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation because this is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from your mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in your mind. So you'd like your mind to be attentive and alert as you're training your mind. So if you have your upper body erect, not only does it keep your mind attentive and alert, but it will make it easy for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to ease us into meditation with some chanting. And if you'd like to join along, you're more than welcome. And then afterwards, I'm going to come back in with some guidance during the meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakhato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato iti piso makawa arahang sammasambuddho vicacaranang sammuno sakatoro kawitu Anutero purisa Dhamma sati satatawa manusanang Oto bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled. Just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, breathing in and out, breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath, breathing in and out, breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath, breathing in and out. Okay, I think our mic's back on. This time that we're going to spend together today is what I refer to as our introduction to the teachings of the Buddha. This is a course that I do in Chiang Mai once a month. I usually do it on a Saturday, and it's to help students just kind of understand the teachings of the Buddha from afar. And then over the course of the preceding days, then we dive in more deeply into what are the teachings of the Buddha, helping you build a real foundation. But first, just to kind of help you to get a foundation or an introduction to the teachings of the Buddha, is let's just talk about what a Buddha is. That's a helpful thing to be able to understand. Is just what is a Buddha? Sometimes people just don't even know that. So let me kind of start with that. What a Buddha is they are an individual who's gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They don't need any help. They don't need teachers to help them, and they're able to make their way to enlightenment by themselves. This is very rare in the world. The last Buddha that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. So you're going to need teachers, you're going to need guides, you're going to need people to help you in order to get to enlightenment. But this individual that we refer to as Gotama Buddha, he started out as Siddhartha Gautama. That was his name. But we refer to him as the Buddha or Gautama Buddha. He didn't need teachers or guides to help him because he was able to get to enlightenment by himself. Then once an individual gets to enlightenment by themselves, if they're going to be a Buddha, they will dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the three main criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. Is they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. And you know you've gotten to enlightenment because your mind is completely peaceful and calm, serene, and content with joy, and no longer experiences any of those discontent feelings that we were talking about. The thing that allows an individual to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides is this individual who was born, Siddhartha Gautama, he had a profound memory. By the time an individual who is going to get to enlightenment actually gets to enlightenment, whether you're a Buddha or you're just an enlightened being, you will have a very deep memory. But an individual who's going to become a Buddha, they have a very deep and profound memory, even in the unenlightened state. It's kind of like an unlimited capacity that they have to their mind. If you think about your mind, you have like a limited capacity. It's kind of like a hard drive. You have maybe 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte, and you have a certain capacity. And if you thought about the things that you've been doing in the last 5 years or so, you can probably recall that pretty well. But if you think back to your childhood, you just have spotty memories. And the reason why is you had to delete old files in order to store new files. This is what the common mind is doing. But an individual who's going to become a Buddha, they don't have that limited capacity. They have an unlimited capacity that they can remember countless details about their current life as well as their past lives as well. And they put all that wisdom together in their last life to be able to then get to enlightenment on their own without the help of any teachers or any guides. So that's how they actually do it, is they accumulate a bunch of wisdom over multiple lifetimes and apply it in their last lifetime to be able to get to enlightenment on their own without the help of any teachers or any guides. Then an individual who is a Buddha can quickly determine the condition of an individual's mind by spending time with that person. And an individual who's a Buddha would only do this as a way to help their students. They don't just go around and kind of read people's minds and then just kind of jump into their life and give them unsolicited guidance. But a Buddha is very successful at teaching. That's why countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime because they can observe the qualities of their student's mind and they can offer them teachings that are going to help them to be able to eradicate certain unwholesome qualities and cultivate certain wholesome qualities in their mind. So they can observe the qualities of their student's mind and then provide them teachings that are going to help them to grow and evolve from where they are to getting to this enlightened mental state. An individual who is going to, or an individual who is a Buddha, they are a living, breathing, walking example of their teaching. Whatever a Buddha teaches, they also practice that too. So, an individual who's actually gotten to enlightenment by themselves and meets these three main criteria, they also are a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Because an individual who's a Buddha understands that their students are learning just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. So, an individual who's a Buddha is going to be practicing their teachings flawlessly every single moment. From the moment they wake up until the moment they go to sleep, they're going to be practicing their teachings in detail because their students can actually learn from that. Because they need to learn from their spoken words, but you can observe an actual individual who's a Buddha, for example, and you'll be able to learn and grow and develop. So if you live during the lifetime of a Buddha, you'd probably be interested in learning from that person, right? Because that individual had gotten to enlightenment by themselves. And what a Buddha does is they essentially put down lights along the sides of the path and really illuminate it so that more and more people can understand what the path to enlightenment is during their life, but then also after their death. So, an individual who is a Buddha is very rare in the world. As I mentioned, the last Buddha that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. And this individual, Gotama Buddha, is the individual that we know to be a Buddha because he meets all of these criteria. Okay? So, understanding what the teachings of the Buddha are, I'm going to share with you what his teachings are so you can understand what they are from a high level. And then we're going to talk about what his teachings aren't so you know what those are too. And I'm going to be pausing at different times to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions. So if you guys would like to ask questions at some point, you'll see I'm actually going to pause at different times. And since we have people online who are joining us, if you guys wouldn't mind using the microphones that we have a few microphones around. You just need to press the button and then it'll turn on and then you can speak into the mic and we'll be able to hear you here and then they'll be able to hear you online as well. And then if you like to keep these mics with you, you can just kind of share them around the group and we can pass them around. So the teachings of the Buddha are a path to attaining enlightenment. It's a life of that you're going to actually be purifying your mind through training of the mind. And by getting to enlightenment, the mind will be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. So there's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha. You're not believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning now in this life and you're training your mind now in this life. And because of that, you're actually seeing the results now in this life. And you're purifying the mind of these individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered. So the mind will experience this enlightened mental state where the mind's permanently peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It's physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience anger or sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, any of these feelings. It's physically impossible for them to actually experience it. That the mind has been uprooted the causes and conditions that produce this. So it would be physically impossible for an individual to experience. So the mind has eliminated all of these discontent feelings. And because the mind has been purified of these pollutions, it's experiencing this high degree of focus, concentration, memory, and clarity of mind. Because as long as you have these certain pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind will be muddled and lacking concentration, have difficulty with memory and things like this. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you don't experience that. You'll notice that the mind has this deep wisdom because you would have cultivated wisdom in order to make your way to enlightenment. As I mentioned, you don't just believe your way to enlightenment, you need to actually cultivate wisdom. And I'm going to explain to you how to actually do that in order to be able to make one's way to enlightenment. So there's this deep wisdom in the mind that the mind understands things that a common individual doesn't necessarily understand. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to everybody that you interact with. Right now, you might find that somewhat challenging in certain situations, particularly people who are close to you, maybe like life partners, maybe your parents, your siblings, your children. You might find it very challenging to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful in all these situations. But by the time you purify your mind, you'll be able to do that with ease. You won't be having struggles and difficulties in your relationships any longer, that you won't be causing harm to others. Your relationships will really blossom, that you're not struggling, having difficulties in them any longer. And this is occurring through eliminating what's called craving, anger, and ignorance. This is a high level way of referring to the pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind. There's 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered. They're referred to as the 10 fetters. And they're referred to that way because during his lifetime, if you were a criminal and they were trying to keep you confined to a certain area, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. And what a fetter is a shackle, a chain, and a ball. And they would essentially attach this to your ankle and they would leave you in an open field. And now all the prisoners would be confined in that area. Where today we put them in prison cells or jail cell or something like this. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would attach a fetter around your ankle. So when the Buddha discovered these 10 pollutions in the mind, he refers to them as fetters because it keeps the mind trapped in this unenlightened state where it keeps experiencing anger and sadness and frustration over and over and over and over again. I'm going to introduce you to these tomorrow, the 10 fetters. I'm going to show you guys what these are as we talk in our class tomorrow. But in terms of right now, I'll just kind of introduce you to what's called the three unwholesome roots or the three poisons of craving, anger, and ignorance. And we're even going to go into this in more detail when we get to uh, Saturday. I'm going to teach you in detail what these things are. But just at a high level right now, what craving is, this is the mind's longing, yearning. This is the wanting external things to provide lasting satisfaction. The mind chases and chases and chases. It's almost like an unquenchable thirst where the mind wants this outside thing to provide lasting satisfaction. It's almost like the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases it and chases it and chases it. And if the mind gets this wants or its expectations or its longing, yearning, if it gets it fulfilled, the mind will get happy or excited or elated or some other pleasant feeling. But if the mind doesn't get what it wants, it gets painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. That's where the guilt and the shame and the stress and the anxiety and things like this, because the mind's wanting something, it's longing, yearning, it's expecting something, and it's not getting that fulfilled. So it experiences these painful feelings. So when these cravings exist in the mind can only be happy when it gets what it wants. So if the mind wants the bank account balance to be up here and you get really happy and excited when your bank account balance is up here, well, then when it goes down here, you get angry or frustrated or agitated or annoyed. Or if you get really happy when it's sunny outside, then when it rains, you'll be frustrated or agitated because the mind's craving permanence. It's wanting things to be a certain way permanently, but yet you live in an impermanent world. Everything around you is constantly changing, but the mind in the unenlightened state lacks this wisdom. So as long as these cravings, desires, wants, longing, yearning, attachment, the expectations are in the mind's grasping and holding on, looking for satisfaction externally, it can only be happy when it gets what it wants. This is called conditional happiness. It's kind of like if this condition is met, this condition is met, this condition is met, this condition is met, then I'll be happy. But when those things aren't met, then that's where the mind is frustrated or agitated or annoyed or some other painful feeling. So when those cravings aren't being fulfilled, the anger is arising. This is the second one. The anger, the hostility, the bitterness, the animosity, the resentfulness towards others. Because the mind thinks that other people are causing this anger. And this is where one becomes unskillful, that you can oftentimes push people away. You might have done this in your life where you push friends or family members away, thinking that that's going to solve the problem. Or you might push a situation away. And the mind thinks that this is going to solve the problem, that you feel those painful feelings in the mind and you think that this external thing is creating that. So you tend to push these things away. But you can see that that doesn't solve the problem because you keep getting angry or irritated or annoyed over and over and over again. If it was this external thing that was causing you to be angry or frustrated, when you push it away, you'd be peaceful, but you're not. You still experience anger and frustration and stress and anxiety over and over. When that anger is arising, not only can you sometimes push people away or push a situation away, you might be bitter and harsh and hostile through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. This is almost like an animal growling and roaring at another animal. It's like, "Rrr." It's like kind of trying to fear this person into doing things your way. And in this situation, you can't live harmoniously with all beings because people feel that resentment, that hostility, that harshness, and they might choose to leave out of your life. Or you might try to put your expectations on people and try to control them, force them to do things your way. And these are the three things that the mind's typically doing when this anger is arising. It's pushing away, it's being bitter, harsh, and hostile, or it's putting its expectations on people, trying to control them and get them to do things your way. And where this is coming from is the third poison or this third unwholesome root. Oftentimes people refer to it as ignorance. I like to use the phrase a knowing of true reality because the word ignorance is like a derogatory word. I wouldn't refer to anybody as ignorant, that would be unwise. But people are translating the teachings of the Buddha over to this language of English, and we don't always have the best words to be able to translate. So the way you might think about this one is the unknowing of true reality, or misunderstanding, or confusion, or lack of wisdom. That the mind lacks wisdom, that it's its own craving that's causing the anger, that the mind has this misunderstanding or this confusion, this unknowing of true reality. And because of this unknowing of true reality, craving continues to exist in the mind, and then the anger continues to happen over and over and over and over and over again. So while we call this craving, anger, and ignorance, it's actually because of the ignorance that craving and anger continues to exist in the mind. If it wasn't for the ignorance, craving and anger would already be eradicated. So what you're doing on this path is you're cultivating wisdom. That's what's going to actually help you to antidote this. So we're going to go into more detail about each one of these on Saturday, and I'm going to explain to you the solutions of how to eradicate these from the mind. And as you do so, you'll see more and more peace and more joy coming into the mind because the mind's being purified. The Buddha is teaching you these natural laws. That's what he's helping you to do. The Buddha is not teaching you rules and commandments. He's not teaching you rites or rituals or ceremonies or things like this. He's helping you to understand these natural laws. There are certain natural laws that are affecting you, whether you're aware of it or not. Just like when we were growing up as children, the natural law of gravity was affecting us, whether we were aware of it or not. When we lacked wisdom of that natural law, we went out into the world and we made unwise decisions and we experienced unwholesome results. These unwholesome results where we fell down, we hit our head, we bumped our elbows, maybe we started bleeding, we broke our toys. We had all kinds of problems with these natural laws because we lacked wisdom of the natural law of gravity. But slowly but surely, we saw the truth and we gained wisdom of this natural law of gravity. And as we did, we essentially awoke the mind to this wisdom of the natural law of gravity. And then we went out into the world and we made wiser and wiser decisions. And this led to more and more wholesome results in our life. Now we can climb ladders, we can get on bicycles, we can fly on airplanes all over the world because we fully awoke to this natural law of gravity. We don't struggle with it any longer. But there's these other natural laws, and the Buddha taught these in order to be able to help you awaken and gain wisdom of these natural laws. So, this natural law of karma, some people refer to it as karma. You might have heard that before. That's the Sanskrit version of this word. It's just a different language, but it's referring to the same natural law. The original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language. So people who study the original teachings of the Buddha will tend to use this word karma because this is what's in the original teachings. What this is referring to is a natural law of cause and effect, or action and result. Every time you make a decision, either wisely or unwisely, it's going to produce results for you. And those results are either going to be wholesome or unwholesome. So if we make wise decisions, we will experience wholesome karma or wholesome results. If we make unwise decisions, we will experience unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. So it's nothing mystical or magical. It's not about punishments and rewards. It's not even about who's to blame or who's at fault. The Buddha is helping you to be able to see this cause and effect relationship between the decisions that you make and what you experience in your day to day life. What we tend to do in the unenlightened state when we lack wisdom is we tend to think that what we experience is either good luck or bad luck, or destiny or fate. Or we might think that it's other people that are causing us to experience the things that we experience. Or sometimes people blame other people or think maybe that it's God that's controlling what we experience. So if somebody resigns themselves to this level of thinking that what we experience is either good luck or bad luck, or destiny or fate, or it's other people that are causing these things in our life, or that God is the one who's making us experience what we experience, you're essentially locked in. You're stuck. You can't do anything to change those things. You can't change good luck or bad luck. You can't change destiny or fate. You can't change whether God's going to do something in your life or not. And you can't change other people. Only those individuals can choose to change themselves. So if you resign yourself to that type of thinking, which is oftentimes what we adopt as we are growing up, then the mind is basically stuck. But if you come to understand this natural law that the Buddha taught, the natural law of karma, then you come to realize that you're actually empowered to be able to change any aspect of your life that you'd like to change. Because if there's something in your life that is happening that you don't particularly care for, and you would rather that thing no longer occur, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and then you will experience different results. But if it's good luck or bad luck, destiny or fate, or it's God, or it's other people that are causing you to experience things, you can't change anything about what you're experiencing on a day to day basis. So the Buddha is helping you to learn, reflect, and practice to acquire wisdom of this natural law of karma. And there's other natural laws as well, but this is the main one that he's helping you to be able to understand. So nothing about the natural laws that he taught is based in belief. You can learn, investigate, and examine those teachings that he shared. You can reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or false. And then you can practice his teachings, integrating them into your day to day life. And this is where you'll see the results that are occurring. So the Buddha didn't explain to you the way that the world should be. And then if everybody follows these rules and commandments, then the world will become a better place. He didn't explain to you the way the world should be. He's explaining to you the way the world is. And by you understanding the way the world is, that's where you're able to navigate the world more peacefully. Because if you live in a world that you don't understand, if you lack wisdom, you will struggle. You'll have difficulty. You'll get angry. You'll get stressed. You'll have anxiety. You'll have broken relationships over and over and over again. You'll have all kinds of challenges. And this is just because of a lack of wisdom. It's not because you're a bad person or you've done anything wrong necessarily. It's just that the mind lacks wisdom of these natural laws. So the Buddha is inviting you to be able to examine, to investigate these teachings. Then you don't believe them. You reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or false. And I'm going to help you see how to do that as we go forward in our course over the coming days. And then I'm going to teach you how to practice these teachings on a day to day basis. So the Buddha didn't explain the way the world should be, but he explained the way the world is. And now, by understanding the way the world is, you can navigate the world more peacefully. So if you've ever looked at the news and you're just like, I don't understand why those people keep doing that, right? Or maybe you hear from your friends or family and you're like, I just don't understand why they keep doing that. This is the mind lacking wisdom. It doesn't understand the way the world is. And that's what the way the Buddha is going to help you to be able to understand that. So he's helping you to get to this peace and joy through acquiring wisdom of these natural laws of existence. And these natural laws are the same natural laws that existed during his lifetime that it exists now. These natural laws don't change. So that's why his teachings are timeless. That what he taught 2,500 years ago is just as applicable today as it was 2,500 years ago. And in terms of what the teachings of the Buddha are, as I just shared, the teachings of the Buddha are timeless. That what he taught 2,500 years ago, it's the same exact natural laws today. And the Buddha spoke very clear, very concise, and very precise. You don't have to interpret his words. You don't have to figure out what he's saying. He actually says it very clearly because his mind's very clear and he can speak very clear and very concise and very precise to be able to help you understand what he's actually teaching. The Buddha did teach the cycle of rebirth. Sometimes people don't understand this, but I'll just kind of help you to understand that he did teach this for a reason. He taught that there's a hell realm, an animal realm, an afflicted spirit realm, a human realm, and a heavenly realm. And this can also be independently verified. You might not have the wisdom right now to independently verify the cycle of rebirth and the five realms of existence. But as you move forward in your journey on the path to enlightenment, this is something that you can independently verify. Right now, you might be believing that you only have one life, but you don't have any evidence of that other than the fact that maybe right now you can't remember your past lives. But the Buddha taught these five realms of existence and the cycle of rebirth because this is the way the world is. And as you independently verify it, you'll be able to see that for yourself. And the reasons why he taught this is because as you're learning and practicing his teachings and you're uprooting this pollution out of your mind, it's not uncommon for people to observe their past lives, start having memories of your past lives. If you're meditating or you're going in your day to day life and you're uprooting these pollutions out of your mind and you start having vivid memories of your past lives, like maybe you have this vivid memory of being murdered and it just keeps reoccurring over and over and over again in your mind. If you didn't understand that that was a past life, it could really shake you up. Or these beings in these other realms, even though the hell realm, the afflicted spirit, and the heavenly realm are formless realms, some people can actually see these beings. And if you saw these formless beings and you didn't understand that's the way the world is, you would actually potentially think that you're going crazy, right? Or some beings can actually communicate with these beings in the other realms. You might actually hear them speaking to you. And just like you're at a dinner table at a restaurant and two tables over, somebody's talking kind of loud, and you can block that out and you can ignore that and you can just focus on your conversation. If you understand that that's what's going on, you can train your mind to just ignore those beings in these other realms that are trying to communicate. So the Buddha taught these things for a reason because you might encounter these things. As you're lifting the pollution out of your mind, you might actually have memories of your past lives. You might see beings in other realms. You might actually hear and have communication with beings in these other realms. And if you didn't understand this is the way the world is, you could really be shaken up. You might think you're crazy when you start experiencing these kinds of things. So he taught these things for a reason. But I suggest you set that stuff aside, particularly in a course like this, where it's a foundational course. Today is just about introducing you to the teachings of the Buddha, and the next 4 days is a foundational course. While the cycle of rebirth is there, and you're going to hear me reference it from time to time, I suggest you just set it aside. And the reason why is that what happened in the past is in the past. It doesn't matter right now. And what may or may not happen in the future, it's in the future. It doesn't matter right now. What's important is that right now you experience anger and sadness and frustration, stress and anxiety and all these other discontent feelings like fear and guilt and shame and things like this. And you would like to eliminate that potential. And if you'd like to eliminate that, if you put the cycle of rebirth in front of you, you're never going to get to the core central teachings that it takes to be able to start training your mind. So if you set aside the cycle of rebirth, don't believe in it, just set it aside. Realize it's there, but it's not the time to approach it. And now focus on the core central teachings, training your mind, uprooting the pollution. And then in the future, probably a year and a half, 2 years into your development, when you get to volume 11, chapter 105 of the book series that I share, I give you 17 different criteria of how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But it's in volume 11, chapter 105 for a reason, because that's the better time to actually approach it. Okay? The Buddha also taught about God. Sometimes people think that the Buddha didn't teach about God, but he did. And if you read his original teachings and you see what he actually taught, he taught about this being of God. But he doesn't put God in the center of his teachings because it's not God who determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. It's you that determines whether you get to enlightenment. It's your decisions that lead to an improved way of life, an improved condition of mind. So the Buddha put you at the center of his teachings. He didn't put God at the center of his teachings. But he does teach about this being because people understood this being at different levels of depth during his lifetime. So, in different courses and different retreats in the book series that I teach, I help you to understand this being more fully. Because depending on what it is that you've actually been exposed to related to this being, you might have some misperceptions. If you've been taught to fear this being, you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment with that fear. Or if you've been taught that this being is punishing you or rewarding you, this being is controlling what you experience, you're not going to be able to awaken if you have that type of thoughts in your mind. So I help you in the detailed text that I share and through the classes and courses and retreats to understand that this being isn't controlling you, that this being isn't forcing you to experience any one particular thing or another. You don't have to fear this being. This being isn't punishing you or rewarding you. It's your own decisions that are leading to any particular result that you experience. So you can get to enlightenment with a relationship with this being, or you can get to enlightenment without a relationship with this being. And there's certain things that you need to understand there too. But depending on what you've been taught in the past, your mind might have certain conditioning that you're thinking about this being in one way or the other. And at some point, you might decide to approach that and be able to clear that up so that you understand that this being isn't controlling you. They aren't forcing you to do any particular thing. And you don't have to actually have a relationship with this being if you're not interested in that. Just kind of finish up here and share this with you, and then I'm going to open up to some questions before we move into some other things. So, the largest, most complete collection of the teachings of the Buddha are in what's called the Pali Canon. It's referred to as the Pali Canon because the language that originally documented the teachings of the Buddha, at least the collection of teachings that we have, it's the Pali language. So there's 45 volumes of books that are about this thick, right? You don't have to read all of those in order to be able to get to enlightenment. What we've done is we've consolidated that into a smaller book collection that is more manageable and able for you to be able to approach it. But that's where the origins of the teachings of the Buddha are. That's the largest, most complete collection of the teachings of the Buddha. During his lifetime, everything was oral. The technology to write things down didn't exist in that region of the world. You might not think about writing something down as technology, but 2,500 years ago, that was technology. And it hadn't made its way to that region of the world. The language that he spoke didn't even have a script because they didn't have a need for it because the technology didn't exist. So it wasn't until after his death that the enlightened beings actually documented his teaching. And by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is so crisp and so clean, so focused and so concentrated, you'll never forget the teachings that it takes for you to get to enlightenment. So they were able to document his teachings shortly after his death. And we refer to that as the Pali Canon. And it's organized into 45 volumes of books. In the book series that I share, it consolidates that down into 13 books. And then I make it available to everybody for free. And a lot of people don't study with his original teachings. I've been to over 200 temples in my life, and I've only ever been to one temple that studies with the original words of the Buddha. So if you do the math, that's less than 1%, right? So you actually now have access to things that a lot of people don't necessarily have access to, which is his original words. And you can download it for free from our website. You can take it and go print it if you like. You can get printed versions on Amazon, or if you ever come to Chiang Mai, we have printed versions at our temple where people just reimburse us for the printing cost. So it's helpful to have access to the original words of the Buddha. Then, just to kind of talk about what the teachings of the Buddha are, is the way that I think about them is it's to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. The Buddhist teachings are like the best, most well vetted self help program that you will ever find. They've been around for 2,500 years for a reason because they work, right? The teachings of the Buddha are going to guide you to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt again. And one of the first teachings that you're going to hear me share with you is that what's hurting you is inside your own mind. What the people tend to do with a lack of wisdom is go around the world and fix the outside world and think that that's going to lead to peace and joy and happiness. But that's not what's actually going to lead to your satisfaction and fulfillment in your life. That if you're constantly trying to change the outside world and you're neglecting the inner world, you're not addressing this entire being. Because growing up, we all typically learn to have good hygiene. We're taught to brush our teeth, comb our hair, take a shower, use deodorant, things like this. We're taught to clean this body, but we're not necessarily taught to clean the mind. And when we grew up, if we weren't taught to clean our mind, then we weren't addressing the entire being. We're only addressing the body. So now, what you have the opportunity to be able to do is learn how to clean the mind as well. And now, when you clean the body and you clean the mind, you're addressing this entire being. And now you'll see that the mind can move to more and more peace and more joy. So you're going to need to know what's hurting you. And it's inside your own mind. And that's where we're going to be starting as we move forward in this course to be able to help you guys to understand what's truly hurting you is inside your own mind. And I'm going to be sharing that with you in a way that you can independently verify it. That you don't believe me, you don't believe the books that I write, you don't believe anybody else, but instead you can independently verify what it is that I teach you as we go forward. But I'm going to pause here and see if you guys have any questions on what I've been sharing so far. So for those of you guys that are here, if you wouldn't mind using the microphones, and then for those of you guys that are online, if you could put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. The audio is what? Oh, really? Okay. 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 So we'll have to address it afterwards because it looks like to me that it's working, but I'll have to just kind of adjust it later. You guys have questions? Yeah. Julia, Julia, we have microphones here. To pass one back. There's a button you just have to press. This probably takes a second or so. The one that Randy has, I think, is working.
Yes. Thank you so much, Teacher David. I just wanted to, I had two questions. One was when you reference a Pali Canon, did you have to learn the language to interpret it all? Because I've heard from, I just come from a Buddhist sort of raised Buddhist, that it's a very complicated language. And, that was sort of something that later in life I was aspiring to do just so I could interpret it. But that's great that you have done it. Did you have to do that in order to interpret the Buddha's teachings?
Yeah, so the way that the teachings have progressed is that they've been translated into lots of different languages over the years. In this language of Pali, as you're describing, it's no longer a spoken language, so it's very challenging for people to understand it. Even the English language, it's a spoken language and it's actively used all throughout the world. I bet if we took a poll and took a survey, there's certain words that we would all have different meanings for. Like we wouldn't agree on what the meanings are. So this language that's no longer a spoken language today, it's something that people don't necessarily agree on what the words actually mean. So you can read 4 to 6 different translators and you can see different words that they're using different words for different things. So what I did is I looked at these 4 to 6 different translations and really standardized what I do with mainly one translator. And this one particular translator, his name is Bhikkhu Bodhi. He's based in New York. He's an American ordained monk who ordained in Sri Lanka. And his translations, in my opinion, are the closest to what the Buddha actually taught. But even those translations are quite challenging for people because Bhikkhu Bodhi has a very deep vocabulary. And he's also, I think he's in his 80s. So he's using some words that we don't even speak much anymore. And he also uses words that I wouldn't necessarily use, like he uses the word suffering, which you know that I don't use that word. I use discontentedness instead. And there's certain words like that. So what I did is I used Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations as like a foundation, but then I needed to update the word choices to make them read more accurately for what I know that leads to enlightenment. So I didn't have to learn Pali in detail. I know a few Pali words, but I basically already knew the teachings and I was using Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations to be able to be like a foundation. And then I updated the word choices so that they could read more accurately and consistently. And I also used a very common language because I had some English teachers who were studying with me. They were retired English teachers, and they knew English pretty well, and they were reading Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations, and even they were having difficulties. So I knew that when I would be teaching throughout the world, that it was going to be with a lot of people who don't even speak English as a primary language, that would be maybe an additional language for them. So when I brought it into what I do with the teachings of the Buddha, I made sure the word choices that I was using were very common words that weren't like too challenging for people who aren't native speakers. So I never learned it, but I was able to uh, compile the words of the Buddha and share them in a way that I know that leads to enlightenment.
Thank you so much, Teacher David. And my second question is, so I had heard, I guess in the Buddhist texts, they had said something like the Pali Canon is going to die or going to come. The Buddha's teachings are going to become faint later on, which
Mhm.
is around this time, I guess, from the calculations. And just wanted to figure out, like, is that true? And how I guess we just have to persevere.
Yeah, the Buddha described this during his lifetime because he knew about impermanence and things would constantly be changing. So he gave guidance on how to sustain his teachings for a long period of time. But then he described how his teachings would degrade over time. And he gave these 500-year cycles. And he described these 500-year cycles, and is exactly what happened. So he said, like, the first 500 years after his death, that his teachings would be very strong and very vibrant in the world. And essentially, a lot of people would be getting to enlightenment because when a Buddha has recently existed, we would think that, yeah, there would be a lot of people to get to enlightenment. So that's what happened the first 500 years after his death. The next 500 years, he said people would be really strong in meditation and they would be practicing meditation very closely. The third 500 years, he said that there would be a lot of scholars that were writing about his teachings, like academics and things like this. And this is exactly what we see. This is when like the Dhammapada and other things like that were written, which is a scholarly work based on the Pali Canon. Then the fourth 500 years, he said this is when people will be practicing generosity extensively towards his teachings. And if you look in places like Thailand, this is when predominantly all the temples were being built. People were donating land and massive amounts of resources to build these enormous temples. In Thailand, there's over 40,000 temples, and the land mass is smaller than the state of Texas. So there's over 40,000 temples all throughout Thailand. So that's exactly what we see happen. Then the fifth 500 years is he said that people would be utterly confused about his teachings and that people would be arguing over what he actually taught. And people would be massively misunderstanding his teaching. And if you spend any time on Facebook or other social media platforms, you'll know that that's exactly the case. People argue and fight and fester, and people are highly confused. You see these little sayings that aren't even that are attributed to the Buddha that aren't even his words. So that period of time ended in the year 2017. And the Buddha said at that point that there would be a new Buddha that would arise in the world. And he referred to this Buddha as Maitreya. This word means loving kindness. And this individual would restore the teachings back into the world in such a way that countless people would be able to then understand them. And essentially, many, many, many people would get to enlightenment from that point forward. So we're now living in that time frame. But it's important to understand that an individual who's a Buddha, they're not going to get on the 5 o'clock news and make an announcement like, hey, I'm a Buddha. Everybody come talk to me now. I'm going to help you to get to enlightenment, right? Because one of the things that a Buddha is going to have done is eliminated their ego and their arrogance and their pride. And if someone gets on the 5 o'clock news and makes that announcement, right away, everyone's like, no, that's not the Buddha, right? And it's actually really helpful if people don't know who a Buddha is, because if there was like an outward characteristic of what a Buddha was, like say their ears turned a certain way or there's like a mole in a certain location, then if you knew that that person was a Buddha, people would kind of be like on their best behavior around that person. And the one of the strongest abilities that a Buddha has is to be able to observe the quality of their student's mind and then be able to offer them teachings to help them. So a Buddha would not be interested in other people knowing that they are actually a Buddha because they can be much more effective at helping people to learn the teachings by observing their student's mind and then offering them teachings that can help them. So we're living during that period of time right now. You're welcome. Any other questions? Steve, you got a question?
Thank you. In Western society, I don't in those that teach the teachings of the Buddha in Western society, I don't frequently hear that it is reach enlightenment in this lifetime. It's almost like they don't really highlight that. There's
Mm.
just an assumption that you can have multiple lives, and this is just one of them in a continuing cycle. What can you elaborate on that a little bit for those that may want to learn?
Yeah, from my experience, the teachings of the Buddha in the West are in its infancy, right? The very first Thai temple that was in the USA was built in 1973. Then there was another one that was in LA, in Washington, D.C., 1974. The second temple was built. Now, essentially 50 years later, we have over 100 temples from Thailand that are in North America. But that's like 50 years is like a blink of an eye because these teachings have been in Thailand for 800 to 1200 years. The teachings have been integrated into the culture, and people understand them and practice them closely. So here in the West, as these teachings have made their way this way, of course, they're not very pure, in my opinion, compared to the way you see in a place like Thailand, where they're very vibrant, very strong, a large, multi-million person community of people that are sharing the teachings and cultivating the wisdom and practicing them on a day-to-day basis. So here in the West, I understand that there's so many misunderstandings, because even in other parts of the world, there's a lot of misunderstandings, as you just heard me share, that the Buddha predicted this. So here in the West, there's many misunderstandings that people think you can't get to enlightenment in this life, or some people say that you have to be an ordained practitioner to get to enlightenment. You'll hear all these different kinds of misunderstandings. And this is going to come from somebody who doesn't understand enlightenment. If somebody understands enlightenment and what it is and how to attain it, and they've attained it themselves, they will be able to explain to you very clearly how to actually do it and give you example of how to do it, because they've done it themselves. But for someone who hasn't done it and that is not having the wisdom of how to do it, then yeah, because they don't understand it, they're going to say, yeah, it's really hard, it's very difficult, you're not going to be able to do it in this life, and all these other things. But I can assure you that there's no reason why you can't get to enlightenment in this life. It's just your own dedication, your own diligence, your own effort and ambition to work towards this mental state. But it starts with having access to the original words of the Buddha. When you have access to his original teachings in a very clear and concise way, this is what's going to make all the difference in the world for you. And here in the West, what we tend to have is we have a lot of rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship, and people not understanding that the work that the Buddha is teaching you is within your own mind. It's not to go out into the world and change other people. It's essentially to change your own mind and transform your own mind. But you need to have a starting point, like the words of the Buddha, to be able to start with that. And in Asia and all the places that I've ever traveled, like I mentioned, over 200 temples. I've only ever been to one that shares with the original words of the Buddha. And right there, you're at a disadvantage if you're not studying with the original words of the Buddha. And then the other thing I'd share is that, when people talk about, it's going to take you countless lives to get to enlightenment, you've already had countless lives. This life right here is not your first life. As your mind eliminates its pollution, and if you start having memories of your past lives, you'll be able to see that you've had countless lives already. And the Buddha talks about this too. He says that the number of tears, or the volume of tears that we've cried in our past lives, equals more water than all the water in all the sea, right? So if you think about the tears we've cried in this life, it's quite a bit, right? It might be several gallons, right? But now, if you take all those different lifetimes and put them together, these countless lives, he's saying it's more water than all the water in all the seas. And if you've done any scuba diving, you know that there's a lot of water out there. So, yeah, so there's no reason why you can't get to enlightenment here. There's many misunderstandings in the world, just like the Buddha talked about and predicted. But if you study with his original words, you'll see that they actually work. And you have seen that they actually work.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anything else?
My question, David, is somebody who's just starting out, for them, enlightenment is like a north star, right? It's not something they can easily understand. So, what guidance would you give them in understanding like what they are trying to achieve on the journey to enlightenment? Maybe they may or may not get to enlightenment depending how they practice. So what guidance would you give them to understand the north star and at the actual journey to get to the north star?
So, taking a course like this is very important, right? Laying a real foundation and having a relationship with a teacher. If you're kind of bouncing around from book to book to book, from retreat center to retreat center, from teacher to teacher, these kinds of things, you're not going to really be able to soak into any collection of teachings to be able to see that they're actually working. So, one of the things that we do here in the West is oftentimes the ego is very strong, and the mind doesn't want to admit to itself that it needs help and that it needs to have an actual relationship with a teacher. And oftentimes people don't understand how to have that relationship. Sometimes people feel like they have to be subservient to a teacher, or they need to be like a devotee or a follower or something like this. But this isn't going to promote the type of relationship that would really help you to be able to lead to enlightenment. You need to be able to have a cordial relationship where there's politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect in both directions. Where the teacher is respecting the students and the students are respecting the teacher. And now you can develop a long term relationship where you can really steep in a collection of teachings and actually see that they're actually impacting your mind in a positive way. Where sometimes when we talk about Buddhism, we might think that there's just like one Buddhism, but there's actually over like 200 different branches of what people are calling Buddhism. But if you think that there's only one Buddha, there can only be one Buddhism, right? It's his teachings, his words, right? So oftentimes when people think that there's only one Buddhism, they'll bounce around to different teachers, and now they're trying to mix and match things. And with the mind's ego, not realizing that it needs to humble itself and be able to have a cordial relationship with the teacher, and also in our self-service environment where we tend to like watch YouTube videos to learn how to bake a cake, or watch this thing to do that. And that's wonderful about our environment and the time that we live in, that we live in the information age, that if we would like to learn how to do something, we can pretty much figure it out. But when it comes to enlightenment, you can't figure this out by yourself. I can assure you of that. You can't figure this out by yourself. It's just not possible. And you're not going to be able to piece together all these different books and all these different teachers and figure it out that way either. So you're going to need to find somebody who you can spend time with, who you can develop a long term relationship with, who's accessible to you, and you can slowly, gradually build. And that, to me, is like the North Star, is having a collection of teachings and having the fortitude to be able to spend time dedicated to consistent growth with one collection of teachings. Mhm. Okay, so now I'm going to move on and I'm going to share with you guys what the teachings of the Buddha are not. Because that's one of the teaching methods that I use, is I explain to you what something is, but then I teach you what something is not, because that's the way to help you to understand what something is. What the teachings of the Buddha are not is they are not a collection of beliefs. They're not doctrine, concepts. They're not opinions or views that will produce a pleasant afterlife if you believe in them, and an unpleasant afterlife if you don't believe in them. In fact, there's nothing about the teachings of the Buddha that is about you having a certain afterlife. His teachings are to guide you to a wonderful life now. You're in this life now. Why believe, and hope something good happens when you die? Because you're not going to know whether your beliefs are actually true or false until you die. And that's kind of too late at that point. Instead, the Buddha's teachings are very unique, in my opinion, that because you're learning now, investigating his teachings now, you're reflecting on them now, and you're practicing them now, you see the results now in this life. And that's where you can see that they're actually working. So the Buddha is not guiding you to some pleasant afterlife after this. He's guiding you to cultivate wisdom so that you can actually get to enlightenment now, and you can experience improvement in your life and in your mind and in your relationships now. And that's not opinions or views that he's having. He's going to help you to be able to see the natural laws in a way that you can independently verify. So they're not beliefs or opinions or views. The things that I share with you over the coming days, there's going to be certain things that I share with you that you disagree with. I guarantee you, right? But when you hear those disagreements, when you hear things that are conflicting with what's currently in your mind, that's an opportunity for you to learn and experience growth. If I say something that you disagree with, or that you haven't been exposed to before, or you've been exposed to something completely opposite of what I've shared, this is an opportunity for you to learn and grow. Because if you're in a classroom with a teacher and everything they say you already know, you're in the wrong classroom. You're not having an opportunity to learn and grow and develop. So you would like to be in a classroom with a teacher that is sharing things that you don't currently understand. Because if you're currently experiencing anger, frustration, annoyance, guilt, and shame, and fear, and stress, and anxiety, and those kinds of things, there's certain things that are in your mind right now that are untrue, that you're hanging on to false beliefs, to things that you just think that are maybe true. So with a belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it. You guys, I don't know if you grew up with the belief in Santa Claus. Did you guys grow up with the belief in Santa Claus, right? I did. I grew up with the belief in Santa Claus, right? I believed that Santa Claus existed. But by the age of 8, I found out that Santa Claus didn't exist, and my world was rocked. I was shaken, right? My sister came to me and she's like, Mom and Dad were eating the cookies and milk last night. I was like, what? Are you serious? I was so angry, right? My whole world was shaken up because that's what happens when you have a belief is that you don't know whether it's true or false. And when you find out that your belief is false, you'll be shaken up by that. But when you get to the truth, when you're not believing anything and you get to the truth and you cultivate wisdom, nobody can shake you off that truth. Because while I believed in Santa Claus at one time, once I understood that Santa Claus doesn't exist, nobody can ever convince me otherwise. It doesn't matter how many Christmas carols I hear on the radio, how many big men in red suits with white beards that I see, right? I know that's not Santa Claus. Nobody can shake me off of that because I know the truth. Well, there's certain natural laws that the Buddha taught that you can get to the point where you know the truth. And then nobody will be able to shake you off of that because you know with 100% certainty what is the truth. But right now, if you have anger and sadness and stress and anxiety and all these other discontent feelings, you don't know the truth yet. You don't have 100% truth, or else your mind wouldn't be experiencing that. So you need to understand that what I share with you at different times is going to be very different than what you currently think. And that's an opportunity for you to ask questions, get clarification, ask for details, and I will help you to be able to see how to independently verify what I share with you so that you can get to the truth and your mind can become unshakable. It can be steady and stable. And that's where you'll have awoken slowly but surely to the truth. This enlightened mental state, it's not sudden. This is one of the biggest myths about the life story of the Buddha. People think he sat under a tree, he meditated, and he instantly got to enlightenment. This isn't true. This is far from the truth. And you'll see this in his actual teaching. It was gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And you know this to be true because everything you've ever done in life has been that way. Whether it's learning to read, write, and speak English, it was gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. You're probably still learning how to speak English, right? You're still learning that. Whether it was a job or occupation that you have, you're still learning probably. Gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And enlightenment is exactly the same way. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. But it's not beliefs and opinions. It's not views. And there are certain things that you're going to hear that are opposite of what you currently understand. And that's a very good thing because then you have an opportunity to learn and grow and develop. The teachings of the Buddha, in my opinion, they're not religion. Some people describe them that way and they talk about them as a religion. It all comes down to how you think of religion. If you think about religion as like one person at the top telling everybody else what they should or shouldn't be doing, or if you think about religion as rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, or if you think about religion as rules and commandments that everyone must follow in order to create a peaceful world, if you think this way about religion, the teachings of the Buddha aren't a religion because there isn't just one person at the top that's telling everybody what they should or shouldn't be doing. There are no rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. If you've seen those things attributed to the teachings of the Buddha, I can assure you they're not the teachings of the Buddha. I can show you in his own words where he doesn't have any rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship. Because his ultimate goal is to help you cultivate wisdom. That's what's going to lead to your enlightenment. And rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship doesn't lead to enlightenment. And there aren't any rules or commandments. Anybody who's following a list of rules, you'll never actually get to enlightenment because you're not understanding the wisdom behind what the Buddha taught. You're not awakening to these natural laws. So if you think about these things as a religion, then we can say that the Buddhist teachings aren't a religion. When the Buddha awoke to enlightenment, he didn't say, I discovered a new religion. He said, I discovered a better way of life. Right? That's what he was teaching. He was teaching this better way of life, how to become a better and better human being. Because in the unenlightened state with these pollutions, you'll struggle, you'll have difficulties, you'll be angry and frustrated and sad and these other discontent feelings. But as you evolve to this higher consciousness, your mind will function as a better and better human being. And that's what he taught you, is how to become this better and better human being and live this better way of life. And it's a challenge to make your way towards that. But as you do, you'll see more and more improvement in the progression of your life, in the way you function in your day to day life with your own mind and with the people around you. So if you think about the teachings of the Buddha, they're not punishments and rewards. The teachings aren't that. Sometimes we've been exposed to things that way, right? Depending on how you grew up, you might have been thinking about punishments and rewards. You won't see that in the teachings of the Buddha. He didn't teach that way. There's nothing mystical or magical. There's no superstition or auspicious things. You can see it very clearly in his words that his teachings aren't superstitious or auspicious. His teachings aren't something to attempt to force or convince other people to do. It's not like you need to get up from here and go out there and convince a whole lot of other people to come and learn the teachings of the Buddha or do anything particular. Sometimes that's what we're taught when we have a certain belief system. We're taught to go get other people to believe what we believe. But that's not what the teachings of the Buddha are. He's focusing you on your development, on your growth and your development. And you don't have to go out there and preach the gospel, so to speak. You don't have to stand on the street corner and beat a drum and try to convince other people to do things. This is a practice for you. This is a path for you to experience improvement in your life. His teachings also aren't these short, catchy phrases that will produce some kind of benefit. Sometimes, if you get on social media, you'll see these short, little catchy phrases, and then someone will put the Buddha, right? And if you actually research these, about 99.9% of them aren't even the words of the Buddha, but they're attributed to him. So he doesn't have these little short, catchy phrases. It's actually just the opposite. Actually, just the opposite. His teachings are very deep, very profound, very meaningful, and it'll help you to be able to understand your mind and the life around you and the way you interact with other people. His teachings also aren't stuck in a cultural past that degrades and denigrates people. Sometimes people think about, excuse me, I got that from earlier. When they think about teachings from so far ago, so long ago, they might think that the teachings are kind of degrading or diminishing in a minority group, maybe like females or some other minority group. But when you see the teachings of the Buddha, you can see that he never denigrates anybody whatsoever. He never degrades anybody, whether it's a woman or anybody else. He actually taught just the opposite. He taught us to all respect each other, to treat each other equally. So there's situations in the teachings of the Buddha where he's teaching men how to respect women, and he's teaching women how to respect men, because that's how we actually experience better and better results. But he's not doing this as rules. He's not doing it as commandments. He's showing you the natural laws that when we treat each other with politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect, then that's what we experience coming back to us. And we experience better and better results in our day to day life. So he's not teaching you teachings that degrade or denigrate or judge other people. He's actually teaching you just the opposite, is to treat everybody equally and to understand that we can respect and be polite and kind and friendly with everybody around us. Okay? Do you guys have any questions on what the teachings of the Buddha are not? Any questions on that? Any, okay, I'm not seeing any questions online either. Okay, so normally what I do in this course at this point, because it's a 3-hour course, and students are actually just taking this course, and then they're not necessarily taking the next 4 days of teaching that I'm going to be sharing with you guys. Normally, what I do is I go into the very first teaching and help students to understand what's called the Four Noble Truths. This is where, in 4 simple statements, you can learn what is the problem in your mind, what is the cause of that problem, the elimination of that, and the path forward. But I'm actually going to be teaching this on Friday morning. So what we decided instead, or what Vipa asked me to do instead, is that we're going to cover this on Friday morning. And what he was interested in doing is giving you guys a chance to talk with me and ask questions and get to know me, because some of you guys know me and maybe this is their first time meeting me. Others of you, you don't know me at all. And he was interested in giving you a chance to get to know me kind of more on a personal level. So if you guys would like to use your time for that, you're more than welcome to do that. But I am going to teach you guys this, because this is like the starting point of the teachings of the Buddha, that he has this core central teaching called the Eightfold Path. This is what I'm going to be teaching you on Friday morning. I'm going to be walking you through this step by step by step by step, using the original words of the Buddha, helping you guys to be able to investigate his teachings, examine them, helping you to be able to reflect on them, to independently verify them, and to be able to understand how to practice them, integrating them into your day to day life. And it all starts with right view. That's the Four Noble Truths. If you were going to take a hike on a hiking trail, there's usually like a trail marker at the beginning of the trail, and it's going to say like, okay, walk down this road like a like a mile, then you're going to go down this ravine, you're going to cross over a stream, you're going to go up this hill, and you're going to circle back to the parking lot. It kind of gives you kind of like landmarks along the journey of this hiking trail. Well, the Four Noble Truths is essentially that. In four simple statements that you can independently verify, the Buddha explains the problem in your mind, the cause of it, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And this is where you can have a real breakthrough to finally understanding once and for all why you get angry, why you experience stress and anxiety, or frustration, or agitation, or guilt, or shame, or fear, or any of these other feelings. Because if you don't understand what's causing these feelings, you'll never actually be able to eliminate them. So he starts you off with this very first teaching called the Four Noble Truths. And I'm going to walk you guys through this on Friday, because it takes some time. It takes a good 45 minutes or so to walk you through it. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be teaching you the three universal truths in a way that you can independently verify. I'm going to teach you in detail what is craving, desire, attachment. And then I'm going to walk you through the Four Noble Truths so that you can understand what's actually causing these feelings, so you can have this breakthrough. And then I'm going to teach you the solutions of how to actually eliminate them, so you can start experiencing real improvement in your day to day life and in your relationship. So we're going to walk through this on Friday. Ultimately, what I'm going to end with, and then open up to all of you, and Vibhav would like to have you guys have a discussion. If you guys would like to have a discussion, up to you guys. Uh, this is what I would like to just end with in terms of an introduction to the teachings of the Buddha. What the teachings of the Buddha are is what I said earlier. It's to heal from what hurt you, so that you never need to ever hurt again. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will never experience mental pain ever again. You won't experience anger and sadness and frustration and irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of this is eliminated, even the slightest displeasure. And this comes through training of the mind. The mind will be bright, it'll be uplifted, you'll have happiness, but it'll be unconditioned happiness. What you experience in the unenlightened state is conditional happiness. That if my mom does this, I'll be happy. If my boyfriend or girlfriend does this, I'll be happy. If my bank account is this, I'll be happy. If my job does this, I'll be happy. Right? All these things that if these conditions are met, then I will be happy. But in doing that, you actually shrink the amount of time that you can be happy, because you put all these conditions in front of that. But that's all the unenlightened mind knows how to do, is chase after things and form its inner feelings based on whether you get it or not. And if you get what you want, you get happy. And if you don't get what you want, you get angry or sad or frustrated. But there's this other opportunity out here for you. You can opt out of these discontent feelings. You may not have ever heard anybody share this with you, because even in modern psychology, they're typically teaching you to cope with your feelings. But what the teachings of the Buddha are doing is teaching you how to eliminate the causes and conditions that are producing these discontent feelings. And you can get to the point where the mind's cheerful, where it's glad, it's bright, it's uplifted, it's radiant, and you can just always have peace and joy, and you're not struggling in your day to day life. But it is a journey. It's not a 1 week journey, it's not a 1 month journey, it's not even a 1 year journey. It's a multi year journey, but you're gradually walking towards it. When you're standing at the bottom of the mountain and you're looking up at the top, it looks like a really tall mountain. But as you start climbing this mountain, just focusing on one step at a time, next thing you know, you're halfway up on the mountain. And when you're experiencing maybe a little bit of pain in your thighs or your hips, you'll probably sit down on a log, catch your breath, get a couple of drinks of water, maybe have some nuts or some trail mix or something, and then you'll continue up the mountain, right? Well, if you're actually hiking up the mountain, When you get up to the top of the mountain, you're going to have a beautiful view, you're going to have fresh air, but ultimately, you have to come back down the other side of the mountain, right? Or you need to come back down the trail that you went up on. This mountain that I'm sharing with you, it's a challenging mountain. It's not easy, but it's not difficult either. But when you make your way up the mountain, you actually don't have to come back down. That it's a permanent mental state by the time you get to enlightenment. And there's help for you. There's guidance to be able to help you, where you can experience learning in classes, courses, retreats, books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts. You can have personal guidance, and it's all available for you at no cost. I'm teaching here now, but as you guys might know, I teach in other parts of the world. I have a temple in Chiang Mai that I teach at, and I live stream from there. So you might decide to get started here these next few days, but then there's continuous learning that you can continue to learn and grow and attend our live streams. You're welcome to come to Thailand any point. So all the resources and assistance is here to help you. I'm highly motivated to help everybody and anybody who's interested to be able to experience this mental state. And that's why I do it at no cost, because I would like to see people to be able to experience this mental state. Because if you get to the point where you no longer experience guilt and shame and fear and stress and anxiety, this is the best thing that's ever going to happen for you in your entire life. But it's you that needs to decide that that's what you're interested in. So I'll just end this portion by just thanking all of you guys for coming to learn. Thank you for being interested to understand what the Buddha taught. Thank you for being willing to do this inner work, because it's, like I mentioned, not easy, but it's not difficult either. You know, sometimes we show up to a building and we're just taught to believe and believe and believe, and we're taught to maybe worship and things like this. And maybe for an hour we feel great, but then when we leave, it's really hard for us, right? Because we haven't necessarily learned any wisdom to be able to help us in life. This type of work that we're talking about here, it's more challenging up front, but then as life goes on, it gets better and better because you've cultivated wisdom in your mind. So I really admire people who dedicate time and effort and energy for their own inner growth. Because as you improve, it's going to be helping you, and it's going to be helping all those that are close to you. Because right now, there's probably certain harm that you cause other people through your intentions, your speech, your actions. And you can continue to do that, but you're going to experience the results of having put that harm out. It's going to come back to you. People are going to be bitter and harsh and hostile with you too, because that's the way that you're maybe functioning with them. But when you do this inner work and you improve the way that your mind functions, you'll improve the way that you interact with other people. And if that's what you're interested in doing, then you're in the right place. And I'm here to help you, motivated to help you during this week, in this course, and long, long, long into the future. There's hope for you. Okay, so thank you all again. And thank you for all your interest to learn and grow and develop. I'll just turn things over to all of you guys and to Vibhav, whatever you guys would like to talk about.
Hi there. Um, I was going to ask, would you say that there was a pivotal moment or event in your life that started you on your path?
Yeah, you know, all through my life, I experienced lots of struggles, lots of difficulties. I grew up in America, in the USA. I was born in Washington, D.C. I grew up in Maryland, went to college in Maryland, got my first professional job in Northern Virginia, kind of lived in Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. my whole life. But I grew up in a very hostile, very harsh, very bitter environment. I remember as young as age 8 that I would be in my room crying and upset because I was beat and treated, in my opinion, very poorly as a child. And I always aspired for something better and something different. But I didn't know what that was. But I always wanted something different. I didn't understand why I had so much love in my heart for the people around me, but the people around me didn't have that same feeling, that same love and compassion. So all through my life, I was interested in something better, but I didn't know what that was. So I was very misguided all through my life. But then, not necessarily by me consciously choosing to do this, but yes, I chose to do this. By the age of 17, I started spending time around Asian people. I started spending time around Filipinos, Indonesian people, Chinese people, Vietnamese people, Korean people, Thai, Myanmar, different people like this, because where I grew up, it was very diverse. And that led me to seeing another way of life that I didn't see growing up in my American household. That ultimately it ended up taking me to Thailand by the time I was 27 years old. In the year 2020 or the year 2002, I went to Thailand for the first time, and my eyes were opened up to a world that I'd never seen before. Because I was taught that I lived in the best country in the world, the richest country in the world, and the way to get to happiness was to pursue wealth and to pursue material objects and to pursue higher and higher positions in companies and things like this. So when I went to Thailand at the age of 27, and I'd been outside the USA before, but never to a developing country like Thailand, I saw people that were had very little material objects, but they were very peaceful. They were very happy. They were very joyful. They were working together very cohesively, and they were very cordial and polite and respectful to each other. And I hadn't seen that in my life before. So when I went to Thailand for the first time in the year 2002, this was an eye-opening situation for me. That I saw these people were so joyful and so happy, and I had all the things that was supposed to lead to happiness. I had money, I had cars, I had property and a good job and all these other things, but I didn't have happiness. I didn't have peace. I didn't have joy. So it took me on this journey of inner work and self discovery to kind of figure out, why are these people so happy and I am not? And it ultimately led me to Buddhism. And I wouldn't have told you in 2002 that that's what I was doing. I was going on this journey of self discovery. But looking back on it, that's exactly what it was. And I ultimately figured out that everything in Thailand, and the reason why they're so peaceful and so joyful, I don't know if you know, they call Thailand the land of smiles. Because when you go there, like, everybody's smiling, everybody's happy. Not everybody, of course, but the vast majority of the people are quite happy. This is the reason why, because it all comes back to Buddhism. They've been training their mind for 800 to 1200 years, and they understand how to live life, but they don't go out into the world and beat the drum and try to convince everybody else to do it. They just do it for themselves. And if people would like to come see what it is that they do and how they do it, they're more than willing to share it. So going to Thailand was like the big eye opener for me. And then from that point forward, everything else just kind of grew and developed.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, teacher David. Did you also have a teacher like yourself that taught you the teachings of the Buddha to get you started, or did you go through a variety of different temples to get oriented in terms of the Buddha?
I did not have a teacher. This is not something that is common, but for me, I did not have a
See, and then my other, I'm sorry we came a little bit late, but I just wanted to, if you had already spoken about the the life of the Buddha or not. One of the most common questions is, why did the Buddha leave his son and his wife, to go on this path? Some people may view that as abandonment, or something cruel that he did to his family. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, we're going to talk about this tomorrow, but we can talk
Oh,
about it now.
oh, okay. No,
No, I
no,
can
it's
talk.
okay.
No, I can talk
It's
about
tomorrow.
it now
No.
too. I'm just mentioning to you that his life story is tomorrow, but let's talk about it now. Is that, yeah? This is something that sometimes people think is like, gosh, how could you leave your wife and your infant son, right? He had an infant son, and go away. You're abandoning them, right? This is sometimes what the mind thinks. But there's many things that the Buddha did that an individual with an unenlightened mind isn't going to understand, because an individual who's going to become a Buddha and a Buddha is going to function very differently in the world than the common individual. If an individual today was like, I would never leave my family, and they're holding on to their family really tightly, that's what's actually causing them to be angry and frustrated and stressed and having anxiety. Not the family itself, but the mind holding on to it. Because oftentimes when we talk about non craving or non desire, non attachment, people think you need to like separate yourself from your family and like go away. Well, the Buddha did leave for 6 years. That is what he ended up doing. Is he separated himself from his family for 6 years, and he worked on his own mind. But what we tend to do in the unenlightened state with a lack of wisdom is we will hold on, hold on, hold on. And we think the tighter we hold on, the more it's going to keep the relationship together. But actually, what it does is it crushes it and it sabotages the relationship, the ability for the relationship to breathe and actually become successful. So the individual who was Siddhartha Gautama, who ultimately becomes the Buddha, he did leave his family. But remember, he left them in a royal palace, right? Like, I bet if I left you or if your husband left you in a royal palace, you'd be like, hey, okay, yeah, I'm in a royal palace. Like, this is okay. I'm kind of comfortable with this. If you need to go do something, I'll be here. I'll be fine, right? So he left in the middle of the night without his wife and his young infant son knowing about it. But he went on that inner discovery, that inner growth, that inner development. Sometimes people think that for him to leave, that sometimes people judge him, because this is what the unenlightened mind does, is it'll judge other people. And it'll say, I know what's wholesome for you, and I know what's unwholesome for you. But it's important to understand that we weren't in his mind when he was making those choices. And sometimes people think that maybe he was selfish to leave. But in my opinion, it would be selfish to stay, right? Because if he stayed and he held on to his family and the family was angry and disgruntled and irritated and feeling guilt and shame and fear and stress and anxiety, that's selfish to stay in that. One of the things that was hardest or harder is to actually leave and go do this inner work for 6 years. That's actually really hard. And that's one of the most selfless things that you can do, is to admit to yourself that, hey, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make this better. And I'm going to go try to figure out how to make this better. And he left for 6 years to be able to train his mind. And then ultimately he comes back, not into the royal family, but he does come back to that region of the world. And his wife ordains with him, his son ordains with him, his stepmother, because his mom ends up dying 7 days after his death, some of his cousins and brother in laws and stuff. So, had the Buddha never left, he would have not been able to offer these teachings that have helped millions and billions of people at this point. So, if he were to stay in that situation, that is like, I'm going to hold on to my selfish desires, and I'm just going to hold on to my wife and my son, and I'm not going to go figure out how to make my life better and then ultimately be able to help other people. But instead, by letting go, in my opinion, that was one of the most selfless things he could have done. Sure, he spent 6 years on his own to be able to figure out how to train his own mind, but then he had something really valuable to offer back to his family and offer to the world. And if, as long as we don't judge other people, we can see that that was a wise decision for him, because look at all these wonderful things that it actually produced. If he made an unwise decision, it would have produced unwholesome results. But he made a wise decision to leave, and then that's what produced the wholesome results for himself, for his family, because his wife ends up getting to enlightenment, his son gets to enlightenment, his stepmother got to enlightenment. All these people were getting to enlightenment. Again, that's the very best thing that could ever happen for an individual. So him leaving was one of the best things that he could have done, and he left her in a royal palace, in this lap of luxury. So, um, in my opinion, he did something very wonderful. And of course, today there's going to be people that have ego or conceit in their mind that are going to judge him and say, "Oh, you did something horrible and bad." No, like, let's look at it. Like, he actually did something really wonderful for the world, and he dedicated his life from the age of 35 to 80, 45 years, to helping people to understand what he did to be able to get to that mental state.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, sir. Mhm. Yeah, we have about 4 mics around, this one and 3 more.
Thank you very much, Teacher David, for sharing your wisdom. Um, I was just thinking a lot about the reading stuff up here and the discontentedness. What do you think is the most one of the most prevalent causes of discontentedness in our everyday lives?
Yeah, what you're going to hear on Friday morning is what's causing it is the same exact thing. All your stress, anxiety, your anger, sadness, frustration, uh, irritation, annoyance, jealousy, resentment, it's all being caused by exactly the same thing. This is why you don't have to run out and learn like 100 different meditations, because it's craving, desire, attachment. It's the longing, the yearning, the wanting things to be a certain way. You can look at your own life and you can see it for yourself that there's certain things that you want. And when you get it, you're happy. But when you don't get it, you're angry or sad or frustrated or irritated or annoyed. I'm going to walk you guys through in a way that you can see this for yourself, but it's all the same thing. That the mind, think back to when we were children. Here's a really good example, right? Think back to when we were children, when mom or dad, or we just yeah. So when mom or dad, like when we were little kids, right? We went to our mom and dad. I know you have young kids. You probably see this all the time. Mommy, daddy, can you get me chocolate and ice cream? Can you get me chocolate and ice cream? It's like, sure, little David, here you go. Here's your chocolate and ice cream. Ah, thank you, mommy. You're like the best mommy ever. Thank you so much. And now you ask for it a few days later, you get your chocolate and ice cream. Ah, you're the best mommy and daddy ever, right? We have this craving and longing, yearning for those pleasant feelings that the chocolate and ice cream brings. But then at some point, we say, mommy, daddy, can I have chocolate and ice cream? And they say, no, you cannot have chocolate and ice cream. You're the worst mommy, daddy ever, right? And now those painful feelings, that anger, we think it's mom and dad that's causing it. When in reality, it was our own mind all along, that we wanted it. We longed and yearned for it. We were craving for it to be permanent. Because if we have chocolate and ice cream as a little kid in a day, that's a great day. But if we get chocolate and ice cream like 2 or 3 times a day, that's like, oh my goodness, that's like the best day ever, right? But that's not permanent. But our mind, with its lack of wisdom, will think that it's permanent. So you can look at examples in your life. Whenever you were angry or frustrated or agitated or annoyed, there was something your mind wanted. And if you would have got it, you would have been happy or excited or elated. But because you didn't get it, you got angry or frustrated. This might have been something this morning or yesterday or last week. You can see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. So it's always this longing, yearning. The craving, desire, attachment, it's inside the mind. It's not the object itself. So, for example, a lot of us have these cell phones, right? It's not the object, it's not the cell phone that is the problem. That's not the problem. The problem is the mind's longing, yearning. That's the cause of the stress. So if you misplace your cell phone, you might be stressed or having anxiety, try to figure out where it's at. Or if somebody stole it, you might be so angry if somebody stole it. Or if it broke, right? You might be frustrated that your cell phone broke. This is the mind craving for it to be permanent, when in reality, it's impermanent. It's not permanent. So it's the same exact thing causing all these feelings. And that's the beauty in this, is when you penetrate into it and you see it, that you need to focus on some really important things that the Buddha is teaching you. But it comes down to this, that it's the mind itself causing these feelings, where it's longing, yearning. And it can only be happy if it gets what it wants. And if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets those painful feelings.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
I know that you had a very successful business in Washington, D.C. with the Thai healing arts. Very successful, lots of locations and things like that. I am very interested in the moment you decided to give that all up to go to Thailand and follow the teachings of the Buddha. I'm particularly interested in your thought process and getting the courage that this is the right thing to do, because you gave up a lot.
Yeah. So I went to Thailand the first time in 2002. I went back for the second time in 2005. And at that time I went by myself. And the first time I went with a Thai person. The second time I went by myself. And I decided in 2005 that I was going to live in Thailand for the remaining part of my life. It was just a matter of figuring out how to do it and how to transition over to it. So then slowly but surely I was transitioning over, because I built those businesses starting in 2003, and then I built these very successful businesses, making all kinds of money, and but I was never happy, right? I thought I was, but it was always temporary, right? I had all the money that I needed and wanted. I had all the things that I wanted. I was even going away to Thailand for a month at a time and coming back, and I didn't really have to work much. I would come back to the office, sign a couple of things for about 2 or 3 hours, and I was done. I didn't have to do much work because I had the businesses running on their own. So in 2005, I decided that I was going to be in Thailand long term, but it was a matter of figuring out how to do it. So slowly but surely I was transitioning over to it. And in 2014, my wife and I, we bought our house in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And we were getting on the airplane and we were renting our place in the Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. We got on the airplane and I looked at my wife and I said, "Why are we going back to the USA?" I don't know. I was like, all I'm going to do is go back there, sign a couple pieces of paper, and then we're done. I was like, why go back? Why don't we start living in Thailand? Because our plan was to transition over 3 years. And I said to her, I said, look, why don't we go back and then we'll come back to Thailand in 6 months, kind of sort out a few little things. That was November 2014. And then we'll go back to America and kind of finish things up. And then we'll move here in March of 2015. She said, okay. Right? It was really that easy because she already was interested to move to Thailand. So walking away from the money for me, I had already walked away from money in the past. It wasn't really walking away from the money. It was walking away from the stress and the anxiety and the misery and the despair that I'd created. I created that for my own life. While on the outside looking in, people were like, wow, you're living like the most ideal life. Like you don't even really have to work and you've got employees. You can go get a massage anytime you like. You got all these things. But inside my mind, it was very discontent. I had lots of things going on in my own mind. And while I had wonderful relationships with people, there were certain relationships that weren't going very well, right? Like with my wife, things like this. So I had to like unplug because in that life, even though I really didn't have much work to do, the customers would still call me with complaints, and I was the main person dealing with that, like high level complaints. Employees would call and they would have difficulties and struggles. So I was trying to help everybody and anybody around me, but I wasn't helping myself. So by leaving in 2015, it was like I'm unplugging from this and I'm going to go do some work on this being. And people were like, why don't you sell your businesses? Why don't you keep them operating and then you'll have money coming in. But I didn't want to be tied down to it. I looked at it as like a fetter on my ankle, like keeping me chained down. I didn't want to keep going back and forth between the USA and Thailand all the time. I was interested in just getting to Thailand and really soaking into it and living there. So I just essentially I did put it up for sale and somebody offered me $1 million to purchase it. But ultimately, I turned it down and walked away from it and decided that I was just going to go to Thailand and I didn't care and I just closed everything down. And for me, it was walking away from this life that I had really constructed in a way that wasn't very conducive to living a peaceful life. And now I was going to go create a life that was going to be wonderful and helpful and peaceful and joyful. But even when I first got to Thailand, I was making all kinds of mistakes and I didn't know what I was doing. I got into a lot of difficulties when I first moved to Thailand that I eventually had to work myself out of. But that was part of the learning process to be able to get to where I am today.
Thank you.
So yeah, David would like to ask you from your point when you moved to Thailand in 2015, I guess 2014. What was your transition like into becoming a full-time teacher that you are now, and what was your thought process, and what made you do this as a full-time, knowing that you're doing it no cost. You work only with donations. You don't have any income coming in, and so it takes a lot of like motivation and vision and courage to do this because as the source of income is not there anymore. So how would you think about how can you describe that part of your process of transitioning into as a full-time teacher?
Yeah. So from 2015 to 2018, I basically went off the deep end. I like unplugged from society and completely went away from society. I actually started another company in Thailand that became very successful. Um, but ultimately, it was a very unwise decision to start that company. But even though it became very successful, I decided to shut it down. And in 2018, I decided that I was going to start teaching the teachings of the Buddha again. Because I started teaching in 2005. When I was in the USA, I was teaching Thai massage, but I was also teaching some Buddhism as well. along with the Thai massage, because this Thai massage was part of a cultural framework, a cultural fabric that you couldn't just rip it out of Thailand and teach it to people here in America. So I taught Thai culture, I taught Thai massage, and I taught Buddhism all together starting in 2005. But I didn't really understand Buddhism in the same way that I would later come to understand it. But during that period of time of 2015 to 2018, I thought I was living a pretty cool life, but it turned out that it was actually quite miserable and quite horrible. And I ultimately decided to shut that down. And then in 2018, I decided I was going to start teaching the teachings of the Buddha because I felt like I deeply understood them by that time. But everything that I needed to teach didn't really exist in the way that I needed to teach it. So that's why I was able to create these books essentially from scratch, with using Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations. I was able to create this 13-book series. I was able to develop classes, courses, retreats, and programs and things like this. Um, but because I wasn't working and I didn't have too much money left, I still had to do a little bit of work. So I did some things that I didn't particularly was interested to do long term, but I was making just enough money to kind of do what I needed to do. So I was like a personal trainer. I know it's probably hard to believe now, but yeah, I actually used to work out and I used to lift weights and was much more healthier in terms of physical health. Um, but there for a while, for about a year and a half, I was going to people's houses and helping them work out. And they were coming to my house. We have a home gym, and they were working out. And I did this just temporarily for about a year and a half, helping people to get healthier physically. But all the while, because I was only doing that for like 12 hours a week, all the while I was coming back home, writing books, putting together slide presentations like this, developing courses and stuff like this, teaching online and all these other things. So there was just kind of a little bit of money trickling in for that year and a half to allow me to do all these other things. Um, I was never interested in making money by teaching Buddhism. I was always interested in helping people get access to it for free and at no cost because I wasn't interested in there being any barriers. Like, for example, if I put a price tag on this course that it's like $1,000 to be able to come learn for these 5 days, well, only people who can afford it would be able to actually come and learn. The people who are the most disadvantaged beings, who are struggling the most in the world, that actually need these teachings a lot, they would be priced out. They wouldn't be able to come learn. So I was interested in removing all the obstacles, the financial obstacle, the distance in terms of living in Thailand. So that's why I live stream and have all these books that I distribute for free and all these things online. So I was doing all this work to try to get these teachings into a form that I could present them to people because I knew there would be a Vibhav someday that really needed these teachings, but didn't know where to turn and needed access to them. So I was working on my own in my own home. A lot of this was going on during COVID, where I was at home, working on these things and teaching online. And then eventually, after a year and a half of teaching, and there were more and more students who were coming, and people were getting benefit. People were seeing that their mind was improving, and they were becoming more peaceful and more joyful, and they knew it was these teachings that were doing it. They started asking me if they could donate money and be able to help me to do what I was doing. And initially, I turned down all the donations because I wasn't really interested in accepting donations. But eventually, I got to a point where I was basically exhausted my resources, and there was no ability for me to go forward if I didn't accept donations. So I started reluctantly accepting donations and realizing that that was part of what I needed to do. And it actually is helpful for a student to actually practice generosity because it trains your mind to let go. But for me, uh, what I live on now in Thailand, because my expenses are so low, is about the amount that I would make in 1 hour when I was in business, right? Like I can tell you guys, I get about $2,000 a month in support from people like Vibhav and some of you guys. You support me to be able to do what I do. I get about $2,000 a month. I used to make more than that in 1 hour when I was in business for myself. But when you eliminate your cravings, your desires, you're not out there buying all the best clothes and the brand new iPhone and the nicest car. Before I drove $100,000 car, I had motorcycles, three, four, five, six different motorcycles, and two different homes, and I had all kinds of expensive clothing. I would wear $300 shoes and several $100 pair of pants and shirt. where now I wear a $5 shirt and $5 pair of pants and very simple clothing and things like this. So now I don't really need a lot of money to sustain my life, but that's all I need to do is sustain my life. I don't need to live in a mansion or wear Rolex watches, and I've done all that stuff. I've been there, done that, and I know it doesn't lead to peace and it doesn't lead to joy. It doesn't mean if you wear a Rolex watch, there's anything wrong with that. It doesn't matter if you drive a Mercedes, there's nothing wrong with that. You just need to learn how to not be attached to it and want it to be permanent. But for me to live this life that I'm living now, I needed to get rid of all that stuff. So I got rid of all of it and I started from zero in terms of the content that I had to be able to offer, but also in terms of my material possessions. I brought everything down to zero. And now, slowly but surely, people have supported me and I've been able to, build what I've been able to build at the temple and the books and all the things. People have been very generous to support me, and I'm so appreciative of that support because that helps me to be able to do what I do. But there was this period of time for a good year and a half where I was kind of living two lives, where I was going out in the world and doing personal training just to make a little bit of money, and then I was doing everything I could to get these teachings into a form that could be offered, all over the world to countless people.
So I have two follow-on questions. One is that, and they kind of go together, and continuation of what you're just talking about. That how did you get into with Watan you teaching there? Because one, you chose not to be an ordained monk, and the general way that Buddhism has been, even in the lifetime Buddha, a lot of people basically became ordained monks and learned with them, even though they were householders learning with them. So how did you? And over time, it has become that, as you said in the discourse, that it is thought that only ordained monks can achieve enlightenment and teach the Buddhism, right? So how did you? How were you able to uh, be part of that community where you are part of a temple, even though you're not an ordained monk, and you're able to teach from there? That's number one question. And then,
Let me answer one at a time.
yes,
I
okay,
like to do
yes,
one question at a time.
okay,
Okay. So in 2001 is when I started spending time around Thai people. Before that, I was spending time around other Asian cultures as well, like I was mentioning, but it was in 2001 that I started spending time around Thai people. So I've been deeply part of the Thai community here in the US, but also back in Thailand since 2001 and gradually building countless relationships in the community. In 2018, when I decided I was going to start teaching again and went out into the community, I started meeting people and people started interacting with me and kind of talking with me and stuff like this. And I was invited to Wat Tung Yu. This is the way that it works. You don't show up at a temple and like knock, 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 knock. I would like to teach here. Will you guys let me teach here? That's not the way it works. That in Thailand, people need to invite you to come. So I was invited to this temple called Wat Tung Yu, which is kind of in the heart of Chiang Mai City, which is a northern city in Thailand, the second largest city in the country. And this temple, Wat Tung Yu, people invited me to go there. So I went there and I kind of sat in the back of the main temple building. And as tourists were coming in and out, I would just talk to them for like 5 or 10 minutes if they asked questions, or an hour here and there. Sometimes they would sit down, they would like to have a longer discussion. And I would talk to them and help them to learn. So I did that for about 3 years. And during that period of time, I started to host a course or two here or there. And we held it in the main building. And the main building can probably hold, like, I would say 200 people, maybe 300 people in that main building. And we started to exceed the capacity of the building. And as Thai people started coming into the building to be able to show respect to the Buddha, they couldn't get in. And they went to the abbot and they said, the abbot's the leader of the temple. And they asked him, like, hey, what's going on? There's this, they call us Falang, foreigners, they call us Falang. There's this Falang over there, teaching in the main temple building, and we can't get in. So they came to me after about 3 years, and they said, hey, we need you to move to this other building over here. And I was like, all right, no problem. So we moved over to this other building, and I held a course. And on the first day, we outgrew the size of that building. So I went to him, and at this point, I brought my wife with me and my son. I have a young son, and introduced him. to them, and I let him know that at some point, if it would be okay with him, I would like to have another place to teach because this place we had outgrown it. And he said, "Oh, when are you going to be looking for a place?" And I was like, "Oh, whenever you get to it, up to you." He's like, "Well, I happen to have a place right now." And I was like, "Oh, really? Can you show it to me?" So he walked me into this classroom, and it was all dilapidated and not really well cared for. And I was like, "Oh, this is perfect. Can I teach here?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "All right, I'm going to spruce this place up, and over time, I'll teach here." So that's where I started teaching. There's a classroom in that temple, and we can now accommodate probably 60 to 80, maybe 100 people in that space. And there's days where we outgrow that because of the busy season, and we'll reach capacity of that. And students have supported me in revitalizing that space, and now it's been remodeled and redone. And but I got there through invitation, and now the local Thai community, more and more people have learned what I'm doing, and they support what I'm doing, and they will, like, the owners of hotels will put signs in their lobbies and tell their customers that I'm teaching, because a lot of the tourists that come there, they're English speaking, and they will come to learn with me. And it just so happens that Abbott said that he's always been interested in an English speaking teacher there, but he never had one. So he's really pleased that I come there to teach. So now the Thai people have more than adopted me and kind of accepted me into their community, dating all the way back to 2001. And because I know Thai culture and I know Thai language, I can easily conversate and have relationships with them. And they've just invited me in and given us this space to be able to host classes.
One more question, then I'll go to someone else. Is that going back to the ordained monks versus householder?
Mm-hmm.
You're a householder yourself. You have a wife and a son, and the perception is that only ordained monks can attain enlightenment because they go out and live their householder life, and they live in the monasteries or forests, and then they can spend the time to learn the teachings and then practice them, and so that's the way to get to enlightenment, or any better state, right? And the householders cannot get to that state because they're householders and they have to deal with all the mundane stuff of life, right? So given that you are yourself a householder and living in householder life, you're not going into the forest, and how do you how do you explain and how do you guide people like us who are, I mean, we're not trying to be monks or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
We would like to live in this life, and we would like to work towards getting a better mental state, an enlightened mental state, still living the life that we have with our families, with our relationships, with our whatever we have. It's not like we're trying to sell all the stuff and like go leave somewhere, right? So how would you uh, guide people like us into understanding that, okay, you can get to a better state of mental state, and you can potentially get enlightenment while being in this life and while dealing with people, with the rest of the world who may or may not be enlightened, right? So how do you guide us?
Sure. So the Buddha, he gave an example of how to get to enlightenment through what we would refer to as an ordained lifestyle. He gave a great example of that. And ordained practitioners, if they penetrate into the teachings, they have the ability to do that. Oftentimes, they're not studying the original words of the Buddha, so they're hindered in their ability to get to enlightenment, but they have that example from the Buddha. But there hasn't been anybody that is kind of given an example from the household life. So at one point, I was deeply considering ordaining, and I went to a temple, and they said, "Yeah, we'll ordain you." And my family, my son and my wife said, "Yeah, you can go ordain, no problem." And they left me at the temple, and I was there to think about this and consult with the monks and decide. And what I thought about at that time when I was at the temple is that my wife was unemployed at the time. She was having a very challenging time with my 6-year-old son at the time. He was 6 years old. They were having a turbulent relationship. And while me going off and going to the temple might have been fine and great, I felt like I was leaving them in their suffering. And I felt like that I wasn't going to be able to give an example to the household practitioners of how to get to enlightenment if I went off and ordained. So instead, I decided to stay in the household life so I could help my wife and help my son, and I could help other household practitioners too. Because I live the same life as you guys, right? I travel in an airports. I live in a home. I have a wife and a son. I take my son to school each day. We just actually switched into homeschooling. I pick my son up. I go to football practice, which is soccer for you guys. Go to soccer practice and do all the same things that you guys do. So that when you guys ask me a question about your children or your life partner or your work or your career or anything like that, I can relate to it because I live that life. Whereas if I would have like isolated myself in a monastery, I wouldn't be living that life. So when you guys ask me a question, I would be lost of how to share with you how to practice these teachings to be able to help you. But because I live the same life as you, when you ask me a question, I can explain to you exactly how to practice the teachings in your current lifestyle. And that was most important to me because I felt like the Buddha had already given a great example for how to get to enlightenment in that lifestyle, but there hadn't been anyone in a household lifestyle. So sometimes people think that it's only an ordained practitioner that can get to enlightenment. And this oftentimes comes from people who are coming from a Christian background, because in Christianity, we're taught that you got to emulate Jesus. And whatever Jesus did, like emulate his life, and that's the whole goal. So people think that the goal of the teachings of the Buddha is to emulate the Buddha and do whatever the Buddha did, and that's how you're going to get to enlightenment. But you need to understand that that's one particular lifestyle, and there's nothing about wearing an orange robe and shaving your head and living in a monastery that's going to magically get you to enlightenment. That's not what's going to actually get you to enlightenment. The same thing that an ordained practitioner has to do in order to train their mind to get to enlightenment is the exact same thing that a household practitioner has to do to be able to get to enlightenment, but it's just a different approach. So, for example, ordained practitioner will wear an orange robe and shave their hair because they're trying to not project a self image in the world. They're trying to train their mind to not become angry and frustrated and irritated when someone jokes you about your physical appearance or they degrade you or denigrate you about this thing or that thing. Because if somebody says something to you about this physical body right now in a degrading or negative way, you probably get angry, you probably get frustrated. And that's just because your mind hasn't been trained to let that go. You're still holding on to this as who you are as a person. So when you wear an orange robe and you shave your hair, that's helping you to let go of that. We call it personal existence view. You'll learn about this on Friday morning. But ultimately, you can accomplish the same exact thing, but you don't need to wear an orange robe and shave your hair. There's other ways for you to be able to accomplish that. But since the Buddha did it with orange robes and shaving his head, that's what people know. But when you talk with someone who's done it from a household life, then you can see that it's actually possible. You just need to learn from that person. What did you do to get to that point where you no longer get angry or frustrated when somebody says something about this physical body? So you can absolutely get to enlightenment from the household life. One of the things that I share with people to help them be able to see this is that the mind of a household practitioner and an ordained practitioner is exactly the same. It's a human being, it's a human mind. It's just a different lifestyle. But the pollutions that are in the mind are exactly the same, and the techniques to eradicate them are exactly the same. And then one of the things that I help people to see is that we know that the Buddha was a very wise individual. He was very smart. He understood what he was teaching, and he used his time wisely. And he was very productive, and he was very successful, because here we are 2,500 years later still talking about this person, right? So he obviously did something very successful and very monumental. And this individual is very productive during his lifetime. He's not going to waste his time doing things that aren't beneficial. During his lifetime, he taught household practitioners because household practitioners can get to enlightenment. During his lifetime, it was more rare because during his lifetime, household practitioners just had to sustain their life. I mean, just to get water, I hear water over there. You guys getting glasses of water, right? Just to get water here, I mean, it was like a half a day or a full day event of like carrying buckets and carrying water from the water well to your home and filling up your trough just to get food on your table. It was a lot of work to live in the household life. So they didn't have time to sit around and talk like this. They didn't have time to meditate. They didn't have time to come to these things. So household practitioners could get to enlightenment, but it was very rare for this to occur because they were so busy just trying to sustain their life. But they could get to enlightenment, and that's why the Buddha taught them. Because if they couldn't get to enlightenment, he wouldn't have wasted his time to actually teach them. but he knew that they could get to enlightenment. So that's why he actually did teach them, because he was using his time wisely in a way that would actually help people. Today, as a household practitioner, you actually have more ability to get to enlightenment than the household practitioners during the lifetime of the Buddha, because you actually have more time than them. We have so much time in our life that we fill it up with like pointless things. Well, you might sit there and search social media or look at YouTube videos or Instagram, right? You might do all these unbeneficial things because you have so much time in your life, right? That we just kind of like do these unbeneficial things. We just kind of fill it up. But if you start stripping those things out of your life, you'll actually find that you have time to meditate. You have time to come to classes like this. You have time to read books, right? That you can make this time to be able to do that. Now, some people are more challenged in that than others, like especially if you have young kids, that can be really challenging, but that's temporary. They're going to be 6 years old someday where they're more self sufficient and you'll have more time. So you do as much as you can do now until they get to that age, right? And you just gradually build up from there. But right now, we're at a wonderful time for household practitioners in that you have time to be able to devote to this. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, he taught household practitioners because they can get to enlightenment, and they did get to enlightenment, but it was just not as common because they were so busy just trying to sustain their life. But we don't have those same limitations today. Lou has a question.
Thank you, David. It's great to see you here too. I'm curious because you talked about at 2018 that you feel like you are fully ready to teach um, Buddhist teaching um, to people. And I'm just wondering what accelerated your own learning if you didn't have a teacher back then.
What accelerated my learning was I had a very highly discontent mind. There was something that happened in 2018 where it was like a light switch that went off, and my mind became highly discontent. And there was no reprieve for my mind. Like for you guys, you go through stress and anxiety or anger, and it rises, it changes, and it fades away. And you're kind of like somewhat content for a period of time. But there was like a switch that went off in my mind, and I was highly discontent, and there was no reprieve whatsoever. And I had to find the solution for it. And I knew if I could find the solution for myself, then I would have the solution for all of you guys too. So I persevered for multiple years to be able to figure out how to train my own mind. And I worked and I worked and I worked and I worked. And as I was doing that, I was also documenting what I did in order to train my own mind. And I was looking at the teachings of the Buddha to be able to see what did he teach. And that was like kind of like my guide. But the words that I was looking at, I knew they were off because what I understood about his teachings were different than what I was seeing. But I didn't change his teachings. I just adjusted the word choices that people were using, because people were using words like suffering. You guys are going to hear about this on Friday. Like people will say the goal of the teachings of the Buddha are to eliminate suffering. But what you guys are going to understand is this word discontent, discontented, or discontentedness is a much better way to explain it, because it explains the whole spectrum of emotions and feelings that an unenlightened being experiences. So my mind was so highly discontent that I had to figure it out. And that peace and that joy that I was always interested in from 8 years old, I felt like I was standing on the cusp of being able to figure that out. And if I just persevered enough, I could figure it out. And if I did, I would have a solution for everyone else too. Because it's kind of like discovering the cure to cancer. I feel like I've rediscovered something even better than the cure to cancer, which is how to get to peace and joy. And if you can get to the peace and joy, like this is the best thing ever in your entire life. So that's why, like, if you figured out how to cure cancer, you'd probably go out there and give it away for free to everybody that you could find, instead of like labeling it and mass marketing it and becoming a billionaire. I don't know. Maybe some of you guys would do that. I don't know. Right. But perhaps some of us would say, you know what? I've discovered the cure to cancer. There's millions of people that are dying from this every day. Let me get this cure out there and help as many people as possible. And that's what I decided to do with these teachings, is that I knew there are billions of people in the world that are struggling and having difficulties every single day. And I went through those struggles for 45 years. and I knew what that struggle was like, and I felt like I could overcome it if I persevered enough. And if I did, I then would have something to be able to help the rest of the world. So that's what I decided to do. And I've decided that any business pursuits or career or money, it was like that paled in comparison to being able to offer this to the world.
Thank you. And I have another question is I know you talk about the cycle of rebirth and you said set aside for now, but I'm actually very curious. What's the cause and effect between I hope everything's
Something
fine.
permanent.
What's the cause and effect between your past life and this life? In a lot of Chinese tradition, actually, people talk about the things that you did last life will actually affect you in this life, or there's some kind of laws of karma there.
Yeah.
So I love to.
Yeah, so even though I say for you guys to set this aside, if you ask me questions, I'll answer it. So this cycle of rebirth, in the original words of the Buddha in the Pali language, it's called samsara. You might have heard this term, samsara. This is the Pali word, and we've been translating it as the cycle of rebirth for many years. But a better way to think about this is the cycle of new existence, because every single existence is a new existence. It's a new body and it's a new mind. There's never a time where the Buddha talks about it being the same exact person for each individual existence. So sometimes people use the term reincarnation, and this isn't what the Buddha actually taught, because reincarnation is the way they teach it is it's based on a soul, and that soul goes forward into each individual body, and people think that it's the same being every single time, different physical form, but the same soul. But the Buddha didn't teach that there is a soul, and he didn't teach that there isn't a soul. He left it as an undeclared teaching. So when he talks about the cycle of rebirth, which we call the cycle of rebirth, he talks about it as samsara, which I suggest you think about it as the cycle of new existence, because it's a new body and it's a new mind every single time. And what's causing that, the cause and effect of it, is craving, desire, attachment. The same thing that's causing discontentedness, that stress and anxiety and frustration and all those other discontent feelings, that's the same thing that's causing the rebirth to occur. Because it's like if you had a fire, you had logs on this fire, and this fire, the logs are the fuel. And as long as this fire has fuel, it's going to send off sparks and it's going to get carried by the wind. And now when it lands, it's going to ignite a brand new fire. It's not the same fire as before. It came from the old fire, but it's a brand new fire. It's just created by this spark. So if you die with craving, desire, attachment in your mind, which the Buddha describes as a fire, and he describes it as the fuel, that's the spark that leads to the igniting of this new mind or this new consciousness. And now, if there's a new consciousness, it's going to have to find a body, or depending on what realm it's in, it might be in a formless realm, but nonetheless, it's going to come into existence. So when you extinguish your craving, your longing, your yearning, holding on to things, wanting things to be a certain way, you will see your discontentedness gradually diminishing, the stress and anxiety and frustration, it's all going to be gradually diminishing. And you'll also know when it's completely gone, because it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. There's no anger, there's no frustration. Your life's just completely peaceful. There's no struggles anymore. You'll know that you've actually gotten to enlightenment. And you'll also know from having verified the cycle of rebirth through a teaching called dependent origination. This is one of the teachings that you can learn in order to help you independently verify the cycle of rebirth. This is the highest, most ultimate teaching of the Buddha that you work your way towards, where he gives you 12 interlinking steps and he shows you in detail exactly how you come into the world and why you keep experiencing rebirth over and over and over again, and why you experience discontentedness over and over and over again. And it's craving, which is the underlying cause of discontentedness, but also rebirth. So if there's no craving in the mind, you won't experience discontentedness, and you also won't experience rebirth. So if you like shopping, if you like a 2-for-1 special, this is a 2-for-1 special. You eliminate craving, desire, attachment from your mind. Not only do you get the peace and joy, where the mind is no longer experiencing discontentedness, but you're not going to experience rebirth to come back in the world over and over and over again. Because essentially what you're doing is you're on this journey to cultivate wisdom. right? That if you're in this world and you don't understand this world, and your mind's holding on to this world, wanting certain things to happen in this world a certain way, you haven't let go. So that's why you keep coming back into the world over and over and over again, because you haven't learned what you need to learn in this world. And the mind just keeps coming back over and over until you rise to this higher consciousness. You've cultivated wisdom about this world, you've let go, and now your mind is peaceful and joyful. And now, when you get to the end of that life, experiencing the peace and joy, you won't come back over and over and over again. Mhm.
Frame this question. But there's like a confusion, right? We want to live in this world. Like humankind has seen all this development. I understand the anxiety that we are facing now is because of, let's say, AI, a lot of stuff coming out, and every day there are new things coming up. So one side of the mind says, yeah, we need to find some kind of status quo and some satisfaction somewhere. But humankind has developed so much because of all this development, right? And we need to be part of it and grow so that the next generation gets a better life than what we had, things like that. So my mind is always having this conundrum where, should I be religious? Should I be like just focus on the work? Maybe I don't understand. I don't know if I'm framing the question correctly. But where does, like, from what I'm listening and what I'm hearing is that, yeah, you want to be having some satisfaction. You need to train your mind to have a status quo, right? But how do you balance that with, like, you need to live in this world and you need to advance with it?
Sure, these are like two parallel processes, right? Because you're going to need to have some kind of career. You're going to need to have a livelihood. That's just part of the path. Like if you remember the path, you can see the fifth step is called right livelihood. This is how you choose to sustain your life in the world. And the Buddha teaches you how to do this without harm, right? So you're going to need to have some kind of livelihood, but it's when you're craving and you're desiring, when you're longing, yearning, and you're just fighting and clamoring for more money, more prestige, more material objects, more this, more that. That's where the discontentedness is. Or if you're functioning in a livelihood where you're causing harm to others, this is going to produce harm within your own life. But also, if you're on the other side where you weren't developing your career and you weren't making wise decisions, you were just dull and complacent and lethargic, that's not going to be very fulfilling for you either. So that's where the Buddha is inviting you to the middle way, where you're gradually making your way towards wise decision making. So you can be developing your career and developing your mind at the same time. In fact, these two things go together because as you're developing your mind more and more, you'll actually perform in your career better. That's one of the things that I actually teach is help you to understand how to not just understand these teachings, but how to practice it in the day-to-day life. Because sometimes people think of it maybe the way that your mind's thinking about it now, that it's one or the other. That I'm either spiritual and you use the word religious, or I have a career and I have all these material things. And what I'm sharing with you is you can actually do both. You can have material objects. You can have a family life. You can have a career and all of these things. You just need to learn how to do it wisely based on these natural laws without being attached to it and forming your inner feelings on what does or doesn't happen in those situations. So, for example, I'll just give you a tangible example. Let's just say you apply for a promotion at work, and maybe there's three, four, five, six other coworkers that apply for this promotion. If you really want this job, you're really longing, yearning for better title, more money, nicer office, and all these kinds of things. If you get it, you'll be happy. But if you don't get it, you'll be angry and frustrated, right? And you're not going to always get what you want. So you can chase after it like that and long and yearn. And if you get it, you'll be happy. And if you don't get it, you'll be sad and you'll be frustrated. You'll be angry, right? That's one way to live life, but you don't have to live life that way, right? The other way to live life is be over here and be like, I'm just going to do whatever I have to do. I'm going to do the bare minimum, just make my money and just kind of skirt by. That's a way to live life too, but that's kind of dull and lethargic, right? You don't feel good there. But what the Buddha is teaching you is this middle way where you can gradually pursue your goals, objectives, or interests, but you don't form your inner feelings on whether you accomplish that or not. What we often do in the unenlightened state with the lack of wisdom of what a true goal is we will chase after something. And if we get it, we're happy. And if we don't get it, we're sad. If that's what someone's doing and they're calling it a goal, it's actually not a goal. It's a craving, desire, attachment. It's if I get this thing, I will be happy. And if I don't get it, I'll be sad or frustrated. What a true goal is that you can gradually work your way towards something. And if you acquire it, great. And if you don't acquire it, that's fine too. Maybe you're 80% of your way towards this goal and you look at it and you're like, didn't get to my goal. You know what? I could extend my timeline here. I could give myself more time to get to this goal, or I could add more resources, right? I could add more resources. Maybe I'll get to my goal. Or, you know what? 80% is actually just fine. I don't need to go any further. And now I've accomplished what I needed to accomplish here. And I don't have to be happy, excited, elated. I don't have to be sad or angry or frustrated. I can just gradually make wise decisions towards this goal rather than forming my feelings based on whether I get to it or not. So comes with training. The mind needs to learn how to do this because it doesn't know how to do it naturally. Because the mind's going to chase and chase and chase. And if it gets what it wants, it's happy. And if it doesn't get what it wants, it's sad. That's what the mind's currently doing. But there's training for you to be able to learn how to live this better way of life where you can gradually work towards it. So I would suggest you should look at it as a parallel process. That yes, you develop your career, and that's going to evolve and that's going to change over time, but you also apply some amount of effort and energy towards developing your mind. And now these two things are working together in tandem for you to become a highly productive, highly successful person. But being highly successful and highly productive doesn't mean you're the richest person in the world, doesn't mean that you're pushing yourself 16 hours a day in the office. Highly successful and highly productive means that you have harmonious relationships, right? Oftentimes we think of success in terms of money and material objects. That's not success. Success is, can you have harmonious relationships with the people around you? That's the thing that everybody in the unenlightened state is struggling with. And in order to be successful in life, you're going to need to have harmonious relationships. And having harmonious relationships means that your mind's going to be more peaceful, more joyful, and ultimately you'll be more successful in your career too. Because in order to be successful in your career, you need harmonious relationships. And that's what the mind doesn't understand how to do in the unenlightened state is how to have harmonious relationships with people around you. So that's the success. That's the productivity that one can accomplish. And in order to get there, you need wisdom. And that's what the Buddha is going to provide you in a way that you don't believe it. You learn it, examine it, investigate it, you reflect on it to verify it, and then you practice it. And that's where you'll see the condition of your mind in your life gradually improve.
A lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
David, my question is around the practices that are prevalent today around how we go about doing like the looking at the words or the teachings of the Buddha, right? So especially in the U.S. And this is also going around the world, is that there's a like a large focus on meditation, right? There's like a lot of people have kind of stripped out the core teachings like the Eightfold Path, right? Made it like one fold path, right? Just focusing on the right concentration, and like rest is probably not necessary. You just go and meditate how many ever times a day, or you do it like 3 4 hours a day. You people go to like silent retreats or other retreats. There's vipassana. You like meditate like 6 8 hours a day. Um, I just want to know your perspective on how you think from I guess from my learnings with you, it seems not the middle way
Mm-hmm.
and not the full path that the Buddha taught. So I would just like to understand from your perspective, how do you think about like where does uh, right concentration and meditation fall and its importance within the Eightfold Path, and how it needs to balance out with the, how do you think it should balance out with the other parts of the 8
Sure, yeah. So oftentimes, particularly here in the West, but even in Asia too, there's a lot of emphasis on meditation. This is what a lot of people are doing. They're meditating, meditating, meditating. You'll go away to some of these retreats, minimum 8 hours a day, maybe upwards of 12 hours a day, just meditating. This isn't going to lead to your enlightenment because it's not only meditation that a person needs in order to get to enlightenment. Even though you can't do this, if you were meditating 23 hours a day and you were going outside being bitter and harsh and hostile for an hour a day, you're not anywhere close to enlightenment. So there's other things that you need besides meditation. Meditation is like exercising your mind and taking your mind to the gym. Just like you take the body to the gym to make it stronger and build certain qualities, and then you use those qualities in day-to-day life. That if I went to the gym regularly, someone asked me to help them move their sofa, I'd be able to easily do that because I've got these qualities of these muscles that I built up. Well, the same thing's going on with your mind, that if you exercise your mind daily, then in your day to day life, you'll have those qualities available to you. And as a household practitioner, you need to develop a sustaining type of practice. You need to have a consistent, ongoing practice. And the idea of meditating 8, 10, 12 hours a day, it isn't possible in a household life. It just isn't possible. You're not going to be able to do that. So you need to have a practice that is going to be consistent, sustaining, and long term to be able to then get to enlightenment. Because your enlightenment isn't going to be determined whether you miss meditation today or not. Your enlightenment is going to be determined based on, can you consistently learn and practice these teachings over a long term period and do this on an ongoing basis. And meditation is just one component of that. So you can actually meditate for about 2 or 3 times a day for 30 minutes or more, and you would still be able to make your way to enlightenment. And that's not where people start. People oftentimes start with 5 minutes a session or 10 minutes a session, and you might do that for 6 months, a year, even 2 years as you're building up your practice. But ultimately, meditating for 8, 10, 12 hours a day isn't sustainable, and you're not going to be able to do that on a consistent, ongoing basis. So oftentimes people who think the Buddha sat under a tree, he meditated and instantly got to enlightenment, they're going to meditate for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. But that's because they haven't understood what the Buddha taught about all these other teachings that you need in order to get to enlightenment. So if you understand the full path, then you understand that if you do the math here, meditation is one part of one factor. So each one of these factors are about 12.5%. And meditation is one component of one factor. So it's basically like 6.25% of the path to enlightenment is meditation. But you need all these other factors as well. So if you understand that, then you understand, yeah, I need to develop my meditation practice. That's a priority, but I need to do all these other things too. So let me work on all these other things. Sometimes people think that the Buddha taught to go to the to unplug from society and to go away from their family in order to get to enlightenment. This isn't true either. If you look at the teachings of the Buddha, you'll see a time where a student comes to him. It's a fairly new student, maybe like 6 months to a year. When the student comes to the Buddha and tells the Buddha he wants to retreat to the forest, and the Buddha says, why you want to retreat to the forest? Just stay here among the community. And the student's like, no, 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 I want to go to the forest. I want to be alone. I want to be by myself. And the Buddha's like, no, it's okay. You can stay here among the community. You'll do much better here. And he's like, no, 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 I want to go out in the forest. He's like, I want to be a big boy, right? This is what he's essentially saying, right? And the Buddha tells him this story. He says, okay, say there's this fast flowing river, right? And this heavy current of the river. And there's this big bull elephant that walks down into the river. And this fast flowing river is flowing over the elephant. And the elephant's frolicking in the water and playing and bathing himself and doing all these other things. And while this is going on, there's like a rabbit or a hare watching this elephant. And the rabbit's like watching the elephant, like, wow, that looks so good. It looks so fun. Wow, wow. So now the elephant's done bathing and frolicking and playing in the water, and very sure-footedly he comes out of the banks of the river and comes back up onto the bank of the river on the solid ground. Well, this rabbit or this hare that's watching this is like, I want to be an elephant too. And the rabbit goes into the water and gets washed away and it dies. And the Buddha doesn't say that, but you can tell in the story, yeah, that's kind of be what's going to happen. And the Buddha basically says, look, young student, you're brand new. You're just learning. Don't run off into the forest and do all this meditation and, really, do all that kind of type of stuff. Stay among the community. Learn from the community because not only are you going to need to learn meditation, but you're going to need to learn things like right intention, right speech, right action, and all these other things. And you're going to learn that being around the community because this week you're going to see people that are generous. Like Shweta just came in with some water, gave everybody some water. Wow, that's so generous. That was so nice of her. She didn't have to do that. She wasn't required to do that. Nobody paid her to do that. That was out of the kindness of her heart, practicing generosity, loving kindness with all of you. It's like, wow, that was really nice. You can learn from that. And you're going to see other people. If you guys would like to come in and bring some snacks and fruit and share with each other, you'll see people practicing being polite and kind and friendly and respectful to each other. And this is part of your learning because you're going to need to learn how to go out there into that turbulent world and be loving and kind and warm and gentle. Because it's all too often that you might go to some cashier and they're having a bad day and they're disgruntled and angry and frustrated. And you're just standing there, like hearing all this stuff. And you're like, whoa, like what's going on here? Right? And you're going to need to maintain your practice. So meditation is definitely going to help you, and you need to make it a priority. But when the Buddha was teaching, he first taught you right view, which is what I'm going to teach you on Friday morning. But then he started teaching you moral conduct. Moral conduct is how you interact with other people. He doesn't teach you rules, he teaches you the natural laws. If you think about it like a pipe has exploded and there's this oil that's spewing all over the world, what's the first thing you're going to do? Are you going to go clean up the oil that's on the ground? Or are you going to stop the pipe from spewing all over the world? Right? You're going to stop the pipe from spewing all over the world. Well, that's what's happening with your moral conduct. Like to a certain degree, you might be bitter and harsh and hostile to the people around you. You might be functioning in that way towards those people. You're just spewing oil into the world. And now you're going to have to deal with that coming back to you. So if you're bitter and harsh and hostile to your friends or your family members, as you put that out, that's going to come back to you. And now you're going to have to deal with that. So the Buddha teaches you to shut that down as soon as possible. And he does give you meditation and all these other teachings to be able to help you, but just that by itself isn't going to help you to be able to do that. You still need to learn the wisdom of the natural laws of how to speak in a way that doesn't harm others. And when you see these teachings on Friday, you'll be like, this makes so much more sense because now I'm studying with the original words of the Buddha, and you can see that it's not just meditation, it's learning how to go out into the world, shut down all this oil that's spewing all over the world, and not be bitter and harsh and hostile. Don't be disgruntled with other people. Be cheerful and bright and radiant when you go out into the world. And you might feel like when you're doing it, you might feel a little bit fake, right? Because you haven't been this type of person in your life. When you go out there and you're bright and glad and cheerful, you might feel like it feels like a little bit awkward. It feels a little fake. But the more you get used to having your mind uplifted and bright and radiant and joyful, it's going to feel normal for you. I'm going to use this analogy, and I use this analogy everywhere I go, but it's very particularly applicable here because it's a software analogy. And we're in Silicon Valley, right? So I have this analogy that I explain to you guys what you're actually doing on the path to enlightenment is you're upgrading the operating system in your mind. If you think back to the old computers, if you guys ever used Windows-based computers, right? If you guys remember like Windows 3.1, right? That was like a really old, archaic operating system. But at some point, Windows 95 came along, and we were all upgrading to Windows 95. And I remember people being disgruntled and agitated and frustrated because I was working in tech support at that time and help desk support. And people were frustrated, agitated, upgrading to this new operating system was Windows 95. But eventually, after a few weeks, people are like, this is good. This is nice. Oh, I like this new operating system. Why didn't they always do it this way? But then after Windows 95, some other version came out, right? And then it was like people were disgruntled and agitated to get up and running on that. But then eventually it was like, wow, this is perfect. This is the way they should have always done it, right? So what you're doing on this path to enlightenment, and meditation is part of it, but it's not all of it, is that you're upgrading your operating system. Right now, you're operating on unEnlightened 1.0. That's the version of software that you're operating on, right? But you've got to upgrade to Enlightenment 9.0. That's what you'd like to get to. But it's going to be incremental upgrades. You can't just go from 1.0 to 9.0. You got to incrementally upgrade your operating system. And as you do, you're going to be like, wow, this is so much easier. But when you move versions, it's like, whoa, this is cumbersome. This doesn't feel right to go out into the world and be bright and radiant and joyful with people. This feels weird and cumbersome. But after you do it for 2 or 3 weeks or a month or two, it's like, oh, this is actually easier. I like this. This is better. And now you start getting used to that new operating system. And by the time you get to Enlightenment 9.0, if that's what we like to call it, it's effortless. You'll be practicing these teachings all the time, and it'll feel completely normal for you. But in the process, there's some growth and development and challenges along the way. And one of the things the Buddha teaches you, and I agree, is don't shrink back from the struggle, right? There's a struggle in improving your life. It's going to be challenging. And oftentimes, what we do when we meet a struggle is we turn around and we run the other way. That's typically what the mind will do because it experiences that difficulty and that struggle and it turns around and it runs. Well, if that's what you do, you're just ensuring that that struggle is going to continue because you haven't cultivated the wisdom that you need to overcome it. Whereas if instead of turning around and running away, you turn around and walk towards it, now you get to cultivate wisdom. And now, when you cultivate that wisdom, you will overcome that struggle. And then the next time you see it, it's easy because you've done it before. You can overcome it easy because you've got the wisdom. But if you shrink back from the struggle, if you run away from it, you'll never actually solve the challenges in your day to day life because you're running away from it and you're never giving your mind an opportunity to cultivate wisdom. So this week together, there's going to be certain struggles. Sitting on the floor, right? It's not easy, right, Randy? It's not easy sitting on the floor. It's maybe not easy to come here each day wherever you're coming from. But if you step forward and you walk towards the struggle, you get an opportunity to cultivate wisdom. And now each individual situation that you encounter in life, it just gets easier and easier. So, yes, meditation is part of it, but there's so much more because what you're doing is you're cultivating wisdom about these natural laws, and you can't do that purely through meditation. Mhm. You're welcome. I think after we don't use them for a period of time, they go out. Any more questions?
You mentioned a while ago the analogy about the mountain, and I'm very curious what the fatigue and the pain in your legs that you mentioned in that journey up the mountain. What does that look like in
Well,
terms of your journey to enlightenment?
sure. So when you're coming to a class like this, waking up in the morning, maybe coming here, we did make it at 9:30 though, so it would be easier. It can be like a little bit, sore thighs. When you're meditating each day, it can be a little bit challenging to set aside that time. When you're working on right speech with your wife or your kids or your husband or your life partner, that can be a little bit of a challenge because you just want to get in there and yell at them. And sometimes you feel like that's easier. But then after you do it, you're like, man, why did I do that? That was so silly. And why did I yell at them? Like, gosh, now I feel horrible. Right. So, like, you can really struggle because you're really trying to kind of essentially rewire your mind and it doesn't happen automatically. So it can be a struggle where you're trying to get the right words and they just aren't coming out, and your mind reverts back to the way that you used to function. And you see the error of your ways, and you don't have to feel guilty, you don't have to feel shameful, but you just reach out for help, you reach out for support. That's why you have a community of friends, that's why you have a teacher to help you. So as you're reading, as you're attending classes, as you're meditating, you're going to feel, to a certain degree, there's a lot of work that goes into it. If it was easy to get to enlightenment, everyone would already be enlightened. But it's not hard either. But people have made it more difficult over the years because they're not studying with the original teachings of the Buddha. So gradually, slowly but surely, You will experience challenges and struggles along the way, but you've got support to help you. And it's best to not shrink back from that, right? So when you're in a class like this, like I mentioned to you, you're going to hear things that I say that are completely opposite of the way you do things right now, completely opposite. And when you hear that, that might be a challenge for you to think differently than you currently think right now. But that's where you can walk towards that and try to ask questions and get clarity. And you might not even understand it in the first exchange. When you ask a question about the teachings, you might have to really think about it and reflect on it and ask more questions and clarification. Sometimes as students will start asking certain questions about certain teachings, and I help them along the way. And like a year later, they're like, "Oh my goodness, I finally got it. I know what you're talking about, David." Ah, or a couple weeks later, I know what you're talking about, David. I finally understand it. Right. So when I explain things to you, I explain it to you very simply and very easily, but the mind oftentimes has a hard time to understand it because it's thinking in this old operating system instead of this new operating system. So upgrading can be a challenge, and you'll experience various challenges, but that can be fun. It can be rewarding. It can be, really wonderful to experience those challenges because that's where the real growth is happening, and you can enjoy learning and growing and developing into a better and better human being. Because that's what the path to enlightenment is becoming a better and better human being.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else you guys would like to ask? I'd like to ask you guys, is this the kind of stuff that you're interested in learning? Is this why you came here? Yeah, that's why you came here? Okay. Well, if this is the kind of stuff you'd like to learn, then we've got 4 days of it ahead, from 9:30 to 3:30 each day. We're going to take an hour and a half lunch break. You guys will see how we do it. So we're going to start off tomorrow morning at 9:30 with chanting and meditation. And then I'm going to teach you at the beginning, I'm going to teach you the life story of the Buddha in detail. And then you can ask all your questions about his life story if you like. I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment so you'll know what it actually is. Because if you're on your journey somewhere, you like to know kind of what it's like. But if I was like, hey, there's this great city up north, it's called Seattle, Washington. What would you like to go? You're like, well, what is Seattle, Washington? What's there? What's it like? Right? You'd have to ask some questions about it. So I'm going to explain to you what enlightenment is in about an hour discourse, an hour and a half discourse. So you understand what it is, and you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And then when you arrive, you'll know that you're there. We're going to take a lunch break tomorrow for about an hour and a half. Then when we come back in the afternoon, I'm going to teach you chanting, how to do this Buddhist chanting that we did as part of the meditation. And then each day I'm going to be uncovering more and more and more. We're going to do it slowly but surely in kind of a nice layered effect. We're going to be working in breaks where we can break for like 20, 30 minutes, because in the morning we'll have a mid-morning break. For lunch, we'll have an hour and a half break. And then in the evenings, we'll stop at 3:30. And that way you guys will get a chance to meet each other, because that's one of the really rewarding things of coming to an event like this is meeting other people, meeting people that are into wholesome things, building new friends and new relationships. So we're going to make plenty of time for those kinds of things too, so that you guys will get a chance to meet each other. Vibhav has this great area out back, this nice garden and outdoor patio, and that's completely accessible if you guys would like to go out there and hang out during breaks. He's got this space over here. He's got this great neighborhood to go take a walk. We went for a walk the other day around the neighborhood. It's a great, wonderful walk throughout the neighborhood. I'm sure he's fine with you using all this kind of stuff. He's making his house available to you. His, his name, of course, you guys know is Vibhav. His wife is Shweta. His oldest daughter, or his daughter, is Anushka, and then his son is Araman. You'll see them coming in and out. His whole family has been very hospitable and very gracious to host me here. And now they're saying, hey, you guys can come learn too. They're not interested in just learning for themselves. They're interested in you guys being able to have access to learning and growing. In fact, Shweta is going to join us on Friday. She's taking off work on Friday, Saturday. She's going to be here and a little bit on Sunday as well. So what you guys are going to see is over the course of the week, there's more and more people who are going to come over the course of the week. So I'm very pleased to be here. Very pleased to be in your home and be well taken care of. Wonderful to see some of you guys that I've already known for a long time, but maybe never met. Some of you guys I've met before that I get to see you again. Some of you brand new that I know your son, and I know some of you guys. Some of you guys I've never met. I have no connection to you whatsoever, but I'll get to know you this week. So it's going to be great to hang out and share these teachings with you. So I'm bringing these teachings from Thailand, a place that, in my opinion, has these teachings deeply understood and they're deeply practicing them. And I'm going to bring them here and help you guys to understand what they are. And then, as you need support beyond this event, I'm still here in terms of you can always reach out to me over the internet or come to Thailand or learn from our live streams. I'm going to be here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to support you not only during this event, but long afterwards too. If you would like that support, it's available for you. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn and grow and develop. And I'm here to help you guys before class, during class, at lunch, at breaks, after class. You guys can talk to me all you like. And I think Vibhav has something. Yeah, I have it tomorrow. But essentially, our website is a central hub. But tomorrow, I have like my WhatsApp number, my line ID. But if you go to our website, buddhadailywisdom.com, from there you can get access to all the resources that I have, personal contact. Yeah, the website's like a central hub. You can even schedule appointments to be able to spend time with me. And again, it's all available at no cost. I'm pleased to help you guys and pleased to see all of you guys here. We don't have any expectations of how many people come to these events, but it's wonderful to see so many of you, and looking forward to the next week helping you guys. So thank you all again, and be well. Have a lovely rest of your evening, and I'll see you perhaps another time. Take care and be well. Okay. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap.